Chapter 76, Failed Face Slapping. Why are you standing there like a fool? Come over here, Morgan said. Of course, Artorius wasn't just standing there like a fool, but that didn't stop Morgan from happily imagining various scenarios or even scheming to conquer him. This guy is completely enthralled by me, phew phew phew. Now, he is my devoted servant. He's completely mine. Artoria, my foolish sister, this time, it's a perfect victory for me, the older sister. NgHHM, just imagining it already makes me wet. And now, it was time to exercise the power of the victor and enjoy the spoils of war. Though it wasn't exactly so. Stop daydreaming, you old hag. Artorius wanted to say to her like that if he could. He wanted to decisively shatter Morgan's delusions, give her a profound and unforgettable lesson, and let her know who the dominant one was, who was the one in control of the situation. After all, Artorius was a fair, upright, and kind-hearted man. He treated good women gently and taught a lesson to the bad ones, not changing his attitude towards them just because they were seductive or alluring women. The lesson needed to be taught. The bad behavior needed to be scolded. Promises need to be kept. Of course, at the same time, he had to give this woman a little sweetness, a little hope, so as not to make her resent him in rage. In short, a carrot-and-stick approach. Morgan wasn't the kind of person Artorius desired. It was the same old story. If the situation allowed it, he would have made her realize just how terrifying the Dragon Prince's piercing attack could be. I have a serious matter to discuss with you. Artorius approached the bedside and said to her. Sure, a serious matter. It really is a serious matter. Don't forget your promise to me, Morgan. Artorius said earnestly, I need you now. Come with me to a place, the Holy Grail. You know about it, right? My plan requires its energy, but I don't intend for you to directly use the Holy Grail. I only need you to extract a portion of its energy and store it. Tell me, can you do it? Artorius decided to be straightforward about his intentions, to prevent Morgan from entertaining any unnecessary thoughts. He laid out everything in one go, his expression, tone, and demeanor, all serious and genuine, making it clear to Morgan that he was serious. Morgan. The witch widened her eyes and stared at Artorius in disbelief, as if saying, I've even taken off my pants, and you're here talking about this. Artorius felt helpless. He didn't want it to be this way. But he had no choice. He took a step closer and whispered in Morgan's ear, Don't worry. The beautiful youth's magnetic voice resonated next to Morgan's ear. After everything is over, I will compensate you with what you desire. The warm breath made Morgan's body tingle. This, too, was an act of helplessness. The only one who could help him right now was Morgan. A few minutes later. So this is the Holy Grail, hey. By the banks of the river Seine, Artorius unexpectedly led Morgan to the camp of the Knights of the Round Table. While they grew wary, Merlin, on the other hand, sported a delighted smile on his face. It appeared that he was pleased to see his guess coming true, implying that he hadn't used clairvoyance at all, but had merely relied on his intuition. Humph. Morgan, despite being low in leadership skills, which in turn made the leadership of King Arthur seem great, still belonged to the Pendragon. While the Knights of the Round Table drew their swords and pointed their spears, showing guarded expressions toward her, she remained calm and composed. She coldly sneered and looked at them with disdainful eyes. She was a person with a strong sense of class consciousness, akin to a social elitist, and had no intention of blending in with the Knights of the Round Table. As a princess, her status set her apart from the knights who served in her own family. They were in no position to be compared to her. Seeing that Morgan wasn't cooperating or willing to speak, Artorius had to step forward and say, Don't worry, Lady Morgan is here to assist us. Upon hearing Artorius's words, both Morgan and the Knights of the Round Table felt dissatisfied. The former was displeased with his way of addressing her, and the latter was surprised and puzzled. Why would His Highness bring along Morgan Le Fay, an evil antagonist character here? Rest assured, everything is under my control, right, Lady Morgan? Artorius could see the concerns of the Knights of the Round Table. So, as he spoke, he looked at Morgan. Humph. Morgan let out another light snort. She didn't directly answer Artorius, but her meaning was clear. Yes, she agreed with his statement. This relieved the Knights of the Round Table, yet they remained somewhat puzzled. No one among the Knights of the Round Table wanted to provoke someone as influential as Morgan. After all, mages and knights were two different realms of power. As for their confusion, how did His Highness manage to make someone like Morgan Le Fay obey his word? The other knights of the Round Table couldn't figure it out no matter how hard they thought. On the other hand, Bors engaged in a hushed conversation with Merlin, discreetly gesturing towards Artorius. This created an atmosphere filled with a sense of joy, as well as Artorius's and Morgan's growing sense of murderous intent upon witnessing the two men's joyful conversation. Merlin cheerfully hummed as he observed the aunt and nephew duo's angry glare directed at him. Unlike the shameless character of Merlin, Bors responded to the angered gaze with a warm smile. He portrayed himself as an honest individual, gesturing with an expression that said, "Please, go ahead," to Artorius. He was very confident, brimming with self-assurance. In fact, the other knights of the Round Table were the same. No one believed that Morgan could lift the Holy Grail. They just considered her attempts as an opportunity to challenge their skepticism and see if she could prove them wrong. Little did they know, Artorius had brought Morgan here not to obtain the Holy Grail but to gain some small advantage from it. However, "Go ahead, Lady Morgan." Artorius addressed Morgan like this, and she let out a cold sneer. She took a step forward, then another, and another until, under Artorius's curious gaze, she extended her hand and reached for the Holy Grail. Being a Pendragon, one of Morgan's favorite pastimes was saying no to those who were full of themselves. Demonstrating her prowess and proving them wrong served as an important lesson for the princess. In short, she enjoyed delivering a face slap to such individuals. "So, you thought I couldn't lift the Holy Grail? Very well, this time, I will lift it." But she couldn't lift it. Morgan fell silent for a few seconds before continuing her efforts. With steady footwork, like the twisted roots of an ancient tree and the rotation of a magnetic field with a force of 990,000 horses, she displayed her boundless martial arts skills, and yet, the Grail still didn't move at all. Chapter 77, Anomaly. See? I told you she wouldn't be able to lift it. If she can lift it, then I'll run naked in Camelot. Although in reality, none of the knights of the Round Table said a word, it didn't stop Morgan from imagining their conversations. The knights of the Round Table behind her were pointing and mocking her, ridiculing her for overestimating herself. Her expression turned sour, and she began to calculate the chances of eliminating everyone present except Artorius to cover up her failure. Lady Morgan. Watching this scene, Artorius understood that Morgan was throwing a tantrum again. As he sighed inwardly, he couldn't help but wonder why this woman, who had grown up, still acted like a little girl. Being a tsundere was no longer in fashion these days. He walked forward and said, "Please, Lady Morgan, I will remember your favor." If Morgan really went berserk, he might have to give her another beating. That would strain their relationship. Unlike Merlin, who was useless, Morgan was chosen by Artorius for an important position. So he needed to appease her and be mindful of her mood. If their conversation ended badly and he had to resort to physical violence, it would take a lot of time and effort to calm her down afterward. Hearing Artorius's words, Morgan let out a dismissive grunt, reluctantly drew her wand, and aimed it at the Holy Grail. Watching this, the knights of the Round Table became more alert, even wanting to step forward and stop Morgan to prevent her from ruining the Holy Grail out of frustration. Although they had confidence in this sacred treasure, what if? What if she succeeded? They wouldn't have a place to cry. Fortunately, that didn't happen. With the emergence of a foreboding black aura and the convergence and surge of magical energy, what appeared at the tip of the wand wasn't a fireball, a thunderbolt, or any kind of magecraft attack. On the contrary, amidst the astonished cries of the knights of the Round Table, the Holy Grail involuntarily trembled slightly. Even the knights, who were not particularly sensitive to magical energy, could feel a terrifying power slowly surging forth from the Holy Grail. Eventually, it took shape in Morgan's hand, gradually forming a phantom that resembled the Holy Grail itself. "So, I've been thinking." Artorius smiled and explained to the dumbfounded knights of the Round Table, "What we need is not the Holy Grail itself, but its magical energy, right? So instead of moving the Holy Grail to Britain, why not directly extract the true ether from it? Wouldn't that achieve our plan? It seems to make some sense. But something doesn't quite feel right. Still, if it works out like this, then the plan can be considered a success. His Highness truly has a brilliant mind." The knights of the Round Table discussed among themselves, feeling a sense of anticipation for the future. As a result, their eyes looking at Morgan no longer carried the previous hostility. If this matter really succeeded, then Morgan would have a great debt owed to her by all of Britain. However, the person who ultimately saved Britain was not King Arthur, but Morgan. Just imagining that scene made the Knights of the Round Table uncomfortable all over. However, a few minutes later, under the expectant gazes of everyone, the transmission abruptly cut off with a snap. A force pushed Morgan backward, causing her to fall uncontrollably into Artorius's embrace. What happened? Failure. Before Morgan could even savor Artorius's embrace, she could only answer in frustration when he asked. There was a force that expelled me. At least you're all right and not in danger. Hearing his response, warmed Morgan's heart. More than the failure of the plan, this guy cares more about my safety. It seems he has become fanatically infatuated with me, to the point where he can't function without me. Artorius's concern for her, apart from his usual tricks to deceive women, was primarily due to her importance. In his plan, Morgan was a crucial pawn. Therefore, her safety had to be guaranteed. Otherwise, it would be too troublesome to pursue other options. So, this magical energy. Artorius's sentence was left unfinished, but Morgan understood his intention. Without showing any emotions, she nodded silently, not uttering a word. Artorius understood her meaning nonetheless. It was enough. Although they had only obtained a small portion of magical energy from the Holy Grail, it was sufficient to activate the spell Artorius eagerly anticipated, the one that could usurp fate. The plan has taken another small step forward. Artorius thought to himself. At the same time, Galahad's mood became increasingly complicated as he looked at the Holy Grail. After Morgan's failure, he opened his mouth, ready to take the Holy Grail. Simultaneously, Morgan pulled Artorius along, leading him to a nearby corner. She lightly waved her magic wand, seemingly using some kind of spell to isolate the surroundings. There seems to be something wrong with this Holy Grail. Are you saying it's fake? Not exactly, but it's difficult to describe. Morgan hesitated for a moment. After coming into contact with this seemingly solemn and sacred artifact, Morgan sensed a hint of malice and darkness concealed beneath its radiance. However, this malice and darkness were not directed toward her, so they didn't activate. Perhaps that was the reason she could touch the Holy Grail and still survive. As for the malice of the Holy Grail and the trap attached to it, it's aimed at you, or maybe, Artoria. You are the greatest anomaly of this era. If you could be eliminated in such an amusing way, even the counter-force might burst into laughter. Her tone was subtly tinged with sarcasm. Of course, someone as cunning as you would never fall for it. The only one who would fall for it is my foolish sister. Morgan snorted lightly. So, you're prepared, aren't you? Artorius remained unresponsive, silently pondering for several seconds before asking back, can we try again? Extract it once more. Impossible. Then what about destroying it? Artorius asked again, destroy it, hide it, or do whatever it takes to get rid of it. Can you do it, Morgan? Unfortunately, that's something I can't do either. I see. Then let's wait a little longer. The eastern sky began to brighten, signaling the approach of dawn. Agravain, known for his high efficiency, had already started moving his pawn, his cannon fodder, or rather, his suicide squad from a distance. This is a trap. Only those deemed worthy can lift the Holy Grail. According to Bors and Percival, many knights and adventurers had come here before them, attempting to take the Holy Grail, but all had failed. This confirmed Artorius's suspicion that his cannon fodder strategy would most likely fail too. However, he still decided to give it a try since he felt sorry for his best friend if he didn't. And yet, the miracle did not occur. Chapter 78, My Friend, Galahad. Go ahead, you bunch of scumbags, try lifting the Holy Grail if you dare. Artorius shouted loudly at the people of the Suicide Squad. No matter if you succeed or not, all the sins you committed before will be forgiven. And if some lucky guy manages to hold the Holy Grail, then he's in luck. Bonuses, titles, land. Whatever you want, I will fulfill it for you. I give you my word. Artorius shouted at them, and as he finished speaking, the people of the Suicide Squad began cheering excitedly. Just as Artorius described them, this group of people were all villains, scum, mercenaries, and criminals. They had been captured, forced into military service, or sent for rehabilitation. Now Artorius had given them a chance at redemption, and naturally, they were overjoyed. Artorius's reputation on the continent of Europe was indeed, as he claimed, unparalleled. Except for those who had been fooled by him and ended up dead and cremated, Artorius had never deceived anyone. Except for the things he hadn't been exposed about, Artorius had never told a lie, of course. So his credibility remained at its peak. The prisoners believed that this leader wouldn't deceive them. Several brave members of the suicide squad even started flexing their muscles, shouting about earning a huge fortune. Watching the chaotic crowd, the Knights of the Round Table exchanged glances, feeling helpless but choosing not to intervene. They also thought that the suicide squad would likely be useless, just as Artorius had predicted. However, at the same time, they also anticipated the possibility of success, just as Artorius did. After all, trying it out wouldn't cause any problems. Thus, the Knights of the Round Table eagerly watched as the members of the Suicide Squad charged forward one by one. They were filled with anticipation and then filled with disappointment. It was like mobile gamers staring with expectation at their gacha pulls, hoping for an SSR, but no matter what, it just wouldn't come. Afterward, Galahad took the initiative to pull Artorius aside and spoke to him. "I have something I want to tell your highness." "Galahad." Artorius looked at him seriously. "Do you have any thoughts? Looking at this holy grail, do you have any wish? Do you want to use it to save Britain, just as we agreed before?" "Yes, of course." Galahad nodded without hesitation. Artorius could indeed deceive his friend for the sake of his mother and have Galahad take the holy grail from the start. But he didn't want to do that. So he wanted to make it clear to Galahad, to explain the dangers involved, the traps that might be hidden within. In any case, Galahad was his most important subordinate and also his best friend. He had been helped by Galahad since the beginning of his journey. It was with Galahad's help and support that he had come this far. If only there were more time, maybe he could think of another way. "I didn't expect there to be hidden secrets in this," Galahad said with a complicated tone. After Artorius told Galahad everything as it was, the young knight's expression mixed with surprise and awe. "So, Galahad." Artorius placed a hand on his shoulder. "From the bottom of my heart, I don't want you to take the Holy Grail. Because I don't want you to die. You are my best friend and also my most exceptional knight. Moreover, you are younger than Sir Gawain and Sir Lancelot. You can accompany me for a longer time. Your Highness, this is exactly what I wanted to tell you. Just call me by my name, Galahad." Artorius looked at him gently and asked, "Galahad, do you have wishes or dreams?" "Your Highness. Remember what I said before, answer my question." "Yes, I do." Galahad's voice became resolute. "I want to save this world. Whether it's the Celts, the Germanic peoples, or the Romans, all the people living on this land, I want to save them all. I want to create a world without hunger, without war, without suffering. But if we use the Holy Grail to save Britain, what about the people beyond Britain? What about them? I don't want to abandon them. I want to save everyone." Galahad continued with more resolution. "So, I have chosen to follow you rather than the king, your highness. I have always believed that you have the talent to rule. To achieve those goals, a strong nation and army are needed. We must use forceful means to unify everyone and establish a unified, authoritarian empire." As Galahad spoke, his eyes gleamed brightly. "Without a doubt, your highness, you are that person, the one who can do it. Not the king of knights, nor the Roman emperor or any other barbarian leader. Among the people I know, only your highness possesses such charisma and ability. You can achieve peace through war and establish a unified entity that encompasses all the nations of Europe, a well-functioning and efficient nation. That's why I follow you, willing to sacrifice my life for you. You are the greatest. Galahad." Artorius looked at Galahad with surprise. His words were different from what Artorius had expected. He wasn't blindly echoing others, nor did he adopt King Arthur's ideals and make saving Britain his only task and mission. "You will unify all of Europe. Bring together the Romans, Celts, Germanic peoples, Slavs, and others. Establish an empire that accommodates all the nations of Europe. A nation surpassing Rome. To ensure peace, order, and governance. Yes, you can do it. You are justice. Your Highness's dreams are my dreams, that's why I want and decided to take the Holy Grail." At this point, Galahad kneeled before Artorius. "I want to offer the Holy Grail to you. I hope to use the power of the Holy Grail to assist you in achieving your grand endeavor. We are not here to save Britain alone, but this era of suffering and all those who face setbacks. You. Artorius was left speechless, his heart rarely shaken. He was really wrong, he didn't expect Galahad to think like this. Is Galahad really this trusting and loyal to him, even more so than to King Arthur? Galahad remained resolute. No one forced me into this decision, nor did anyone manipulate me. I have carefully considered everything, Your Highness. Galahad continued. In fact, I am aware of the dangers hidden within the Holy Grail from the beginning. But at the same time, I can sense the power contained within it. Indeed, it is a power that can fulfill Your Highness's endeavor. That's why. After uttering these words, he turned decisively and headed toward the direction of the Holy Grail. Galahad. For you, I am willing to take this risk. It is worth it for me to venture into it. Wait. Galahad. As Artorius called out, Galahad unhesitatingly pushed aside the person who was about to touch the Holy Grail with his hand. Before the person could protest or retaliate, Galahad swiftly knocked him to the ground with a punch. This risk is worth it. Hold on, Galahad. I will fulfill His Highness's dreams. Speaking such words, under the gaze of the onlookers, Galahad gripped the Holy Grail with both hands. I shall open the door to a new era for His Highness. Galahad. Chapter 79, Farewell. The light was spreading, and the true ether was overflowing. The fluctuations were greater, more intense, and more dazzling than before. It's Sir Galahad! Sir Galahad! Such radiance, such brilliance, marked Galahad's unparalleled determination and unwavering will, stronger than steel. It is indeed a trap. But the flaw of the one setting the trap lies in the fact that, in order to make the trap appear more authentic, they used the real one. This Holy Grail is real. Which means, I can do it. For His Highness. For our dreams. As Galahad held the Holy Grail in his hands, he experienced the power firsthand, two powers in total. One originated from a transcended savior beyond the world, and the other came from this world. Earthmoon, this was the name revealed to him by his lord, His Highness Artorius, to whom he pledged his loyalty. Counterforce, this is the term used to refer to the power that sustains this world. Gaia, this is the consciousness, the will generated by the planet the Earth, the role that could cull or rule humanity. How could I lose to such existence? Galahad roared in anger. Ah! In Rome, in Britain, in the Black Forest of Germania, and even in more distant regions, along the Red Sea, in Thessaly, the Mongolian plains, the Central Plains, and many more. All the heroes and champions of this world, mages with sufficient power and perception, and even remnants of phantasmal species hidden in the world's surface, as well as dead apostles and true ancestors. Everyone sensed this power. This power that transcended the limits of the world, held in the hands of a young knight named Galahad in Europe, Gaul, Burgundy, and the nameless wilderness by the Seine. It's been lifted. Sir Galahad has lifted the Holy Grail. Ah! The young knight roared, raising the Holy Grail high. Witnessing this scene, the knights of the Round Table couldn't contain their excitement and enthusiastically shouted at Galahad. Sir Galahad! Sir Galahad! Sir Galahad! The holy light descended from the sky, illuminating Galahad. The harp and trumpet sound from above welcomed him like angels, and the gates of heaven were now open. My dreams and His Highness's are about to be fulfilled. Intense joy caused Galahad to ignore the excruciating pain throughout his body. At the same time, Percival, one of the knights of the Round Table, shouted in fear, "What is that? What's happening?" Galahad's body began to disintegrate. It seemed that the fundamental particles composing his body were dispersing like golden sand. Sir Galahad! Sir Galahad! The knights rushed forward, wanting to help Galahad. At the same time, Artoria and the other knights of the Round Table who had received the news felt it too and immediately rushed to the source of the power as soon as possible, while the knights on the scene tried to approach and help Galahad. But it was futile. A powerful and intangible barrier separated the knights from Galahad. This power surpassed ordinary comprehension. The knights wondered, was this Galahad's personal trial? And it seemed that Galahad was about to fail. His body started to disappear, starting from his feet. The hands gripping the Holy Grail trembled slightly. Is it still not enough? His will and spirit were already formidable. But the strength of his body was insufficient. Although he had lifted the Holy Grail, he lacked enough power to resist the aftermath left by the counterforce. No, I won't give up. The opportunity is right in front of me. How can I, your highness? Then, another shocking event unfolded, frightening Galahad and the knights once again. It was Artorius, who pulled out Clarent and swung his sword with all his might at the Holy Grail. Is this it? Is Galahad also going to the throne of heroes like in original history? Is this the only way? Our dreams, our dreams, our dreams, Galahad, you fool! I merely spoke some flowery words before, deceiving people to lay down their lives for me. I never had any dreams of saving the world. All I had was ambition. I only wanted to satisfy my own desires. Artorius felt his heart tighten. Even though he had already considered and convinced himself to sacrifice Galahad to save his mother if there was no other way, when it actually happened, he realized something. He wasn't as determined as he had thought. Wasn't this what he wanted? Now Artoria will be safe, right? But why did he feel unwilling? However, it was already too late to cry over spilled milk. He seemed to understand what Scathatch meant when she said, "You're not ready yet." Teacher, are you saying that I lack the determination to risk my life for my goal? That's right, not even once did he consider himself to be the one trying to lift the Holy Grail, as he knew that if he did, there was a big chance he would die. You're right. I have other plans for backup. I once thought that if the plan failed, I would simply give up. Surrender to the counter-force and repent later. I never thought of risking my life for the liberation of humanity. Freeing humanity from the controls of the counter-force? What a joke, I'm just an opportunist and ambitious person, a schemer. I'm not a hero or a savior. Galahad, why do you believe in me so much? Why are you willing to sacrifice your life for me? Shock, anger, and sadness filled Artorius's heart. And in the quickest of moments, he had a series of questions and answers in his mind. Not willing to sacrifice for Britain? Perhaps. But what about the others in Europe? They have no connection to me, why should I risk my life for them? Then what about the people in other parts of the world, or more broadly, the entire world? Would you be willing to risk your life for the sake of all humanity? And what about other worlds? Do you know parallel worlds exist? If you bear the responsibility not for just one world, but for many, would you be willing to fight and sacrifice for the happiness of all humans throughout history and across parallel worlds? With these questions in his heart, Artorius recalled his life after being reincarnated into this messed up world, from infancy until today. He recalled the earlier talk with Galahad. His dreams, his determination, his loyalty. Artorius tightened his grip on the handle of Clarent. From the depths of his heart, he arrived at a conclusion. Yes. His answer was yes. He would. Although he was just an ordinary person by moral standards, when it came to the sake of humanity, he was willing to make sacrifices, fight relentlessly, and strive for it. Why was this the case? Wasn't he someone who only cared about himself and his own people? Could it be that he wasn't what he thought he was? Had he unknowingly changed? Or was he always like this, only realizing it now? Was it because his mindset changed unknowingly after living in this world by always being surrounded by his righteous mother, his kind nominal mother, his fellow chivalrous knights, and his best friend? Did Galahad understand this? Was that why he was so resolute to sacrifice himself for him? Haha, you understand me better than I understand myself, Galahad, so, I am actually a hero at heart, screw this. With that in mind, Artorius swung his sword toward the Holy Grail. His mindset underwent a subtle change. The buried sense of justice in his deepest heart was ignited, making his soul shine brightly. Desire, lust, greed, ambition all remained, but the awakened justice stood above everything else. First, let's start with Galahad saving him from the shitty Grail. Radiance gathered and power converged. The raised Clarent was enveloped in a pure frosty glow. Then it crashed into the barrier that separated him from Galahad. Boom! But it wasn't enough. Even the attack of an anti-fortress noble phantasm couldn't break through. Even with Artorius's frost dragon's magical energy, it was insufficient. Give it to me. Are you sure? If you use it here, our future plans will be ruined. Despite saying that, Morgan still brought out the ethereal Holy Grail composed purely of magical energy that she gathered before, and handed it to Artorius. Power was growing, rapidly increasing. In an instant, Artorius had enough power to unleash an attack close to that of a god. Don't worry. The frost blue glow in his eyes almost overflowed as Artorius was filled with magical energy. I still have a backup plan. Speaking these words, the frost blue sword beam once again blasted toward the Holy Grail in Galahad's hands. Boom! Crack! The beam broke through the barrier that separated them and reached Galahad. Your Highness! However, Galahad refused. I'm truly sorry. Meeting Artorius's gaze, Galahad made him understand his intentions. He could certainly be saved now, but he didn't want that. Instead of that, it's better to at least, let your Highness gain power. Guided by Galahad, the power of the Holy Grail flowed into Artorius's body through the breach he had created. Instantly, a greater magical energy than the ethereal Holy Grail Morgan had handed him surged into Artorius's body. But this time, it wasn't a mere influx and saturation, it was a transformation of his body and, more importantly, a transformation of his soul. Galahad. At the same time, Galahad's body began to disappear at an accelerated rate. In Artorius's scream, Galahad showed a gentle smile. It's not the best ending. Galahad said to Artorius gently with his pure eyes. But it's not bad, Your Highness. The disappearance reached below the neck. At least I helped Your Highness obtain the power capable of changing the world. Please make good use of it. Farewell, Your Highness. Please be happy, and know that I will forever remain loyal to you. After uttering these words, Galahad finally disappeared with a sincere smile on his face. With the golden light accompanying the Holy Grail flying higher and higher, it eventually vanished behind the gate to heaven. All the irregularities disappeared completely. Everything returned to normal. There were no problems or irregularities anymore, only that Galahad was no longer there. At that moment, Artorius felt a sense of melancholy. He kneeled and gazed at the now empty place. It was the intense pain and sorrow that arose from the departure of a dear friend. He was not heartless after all, even the reasoning of he only went to the throne of heroes and will reappear in 1,000 or so years with a different vessel as the pink short-haired girl couldn't alleviate 1,000th of the pain and sorrow in his heart. Now he understood what it meant by you don't know what you've got until it's gone. As they watched the prince kneeling on the ground, immersed in silence, the knights of the Round Table, whether those who were already present or those who arrived later, also fell into silence. Finally, it was Artoria, who had just arrived, that stepped forward. Artorius. She placed her hand on Artorius's shoulder, wanting to say something comforting. Sir Galahad, he made this choice of his own will, to save the world. Before Artoria could find the right words, Artorius spoke. I don't have time to mourn, father. I must continue my grand plan. He stood up, raised his head, and looked at Artoria seriously. Please pass the throne of Britain to me. Chapter 80, Ascended the Throne. A bonus chapter for 1k Power Stones. Thanks for the support. Before Artoria could find the right words, Artorius spoke. I don't have time to mourn, father. I must continue my grand plan. He stood up, raised his head, and looked at Artoria seriously. Please pass the throne of Britain to me. Your Highness, what are you saying? What on earth is going on? Even if Sir Galahad sacrificed himself. Upon hearing Artorius utter these words, the knights of the Round Table around him started to discuss among themselves. Almost everyone was confused, unable to grasp what had actually happened. Some of them, who were quicker to react, seemed to have some idea but couldn't fully comprehend it. On the other hand, the slower ones wore bewildered expressions. Although they had held great expectations for the prince, this situation of ascending to the throne and even voluntarily requesting his father, the current king, to step down left many people perplexed. And yet, that wasn't the most confusing part. The most surprising and perplexing thing was that after Artorius spoke those words, Artoria didn't immediately rebuke him with anger like, "Traitor, what are you saying? Or are you plotting treason?" If she had indeed said such things, at least 1/3 of the people present would have obediently followed her and engaged in a clash of swords against the prince. Instead, she only looked at her beloved son with a slightly astonished gaze. It was a gaze that definitely didn't convey disappointment or any negative emotion. It even held a hint of relief. Artorius, you. In my long life, the more I pursued my desires, the more unsatisfied I became. Artorius looked earnestly at his mother and reached out to hold her delicate hands. Sir Galahad made me realize, father. He made me understand that there are limits to ambition. So, Artorius, what are you trying to express? From this day forward, I will be a savior. Upon hearing Artorius speak these words and observing his gaze, Artoria confirmed that he was being truthful. He hadn't deceived her, acted on impulse, or been guided by any chaotic influence. He had arrived at the most correct conclusion through his own contemplation. That was to become the savior of Camelot, Britain, Gaul, Germania, Rome, Europe, and all the people. He will become more than just a ruler. From this perspective, his grand plan had not changed, and Artorius remained an ambitious person. However, he had transformed his greatest ambition from mere material and carnal desires, as well as any other dark cravings driven by selfishness, into the luminous and sacred goal of saving the world. Previously, his goal of saving the world by conquering Europe was mostly a pretense to cover his real desires, but now it had become a tangible reality. He would no longer evade his responsibilities, wander aimlessly, worry, or feel dissatisfied. After confirming all of this, Artoria's tears welled up, and her heart filled with excitement, like typical parents witnessing their child's growth. I understand. Amidst the discussions of the Knights of the Round Table, Artoria spoke. You have always been more excellent and suited to be king than me. My child. She said this while extending her hand, gently caressing Artorius's cheek. Afterward, Artorius let out a slow breath and knelt down before Artoria. We should return and have the Archbishop of Canterbury crown you. Artoria couldn't help but say, observing Artorius's demeanor. I would prefer to receive the crown from the hand of my respected father. Due to various circumstances, Artorius had no favorable opinion of the church. That's why he said this to her. Very well, I understand. Artoria nodded, then removed the golden crown from her own head. I entrust it to you, along with Britain. As she spoke those words, the discussions among the Knights of the Round Table grew louder. Meanwhile, those who didn't belong to the Knights of the Round Table were lost in thought. For the cannon fodder brought here without much thought, they can be disregarded. Even the curious locals who gathered due to the commotion caused by the radiance and the gathering army can be overlooked. The ones truly worth paying attention to were the Roman officers stationed there and a few scouts from the Kingdom of Burgundy. They were astonished, curious, and apprehensive. Before long, this significant political event would surely spread among the nations. Meanwhile, on Merlin's and Morgan's side, the former smiled, still maintaining a light and annoying demeanor. However, upon closer inspection, one could discern a hint of humanity appeared in his eyes, a gentle warmth. Yet, it was unclear whether this trace of human warmth was an instinctive imitation or something genuinely possessed by him. Perhaps even Merlin himself was unsure. Meanwhile, Morgan's expression was one of great excitement, even happiness. It was the kind of look that could be easily deciphered at first glance, as if it were as simple as reading a child's mind, surprising anyone who knew Morgan's true nature. She was actually delighted by Artorius's coronation. Despite her profound regard for Britain's monarchy, treating it as her own possession, and always wanting to reclaim it from her sister, she now willingly handed it over and appeared so happy. Since meeting Artorius, her mind had become more bizarre. Those who noticed this couldn't help but shudder with her bizarre mind, if they were able to perceive it. For everyone, like Morgan, their attention was solely focused on Arthur and Artorius, the father and son. They watched as the King of Knights, acting as a father, placed the crown upon Artorius's head. You shall inherit all of my power in Britain. This includes the Knights of the Round Table, all the treasures in my treasury, the noble warhorses in the royal stables, and everything else that rightfully belongs to a king. After Artoria uttered these words, Artorius slowly rose to his feet. This time, it was her turn to kneel before her beloved son and pledge loyalty to him. Witnessing this scene, the Knights of the Round Table, who held absolute loyalty to Artoria in their hearts, couldn't help but shed tears. Why must the king abdicate? Doesn't that render all our efforts meaningless? No. It was Bedivere who spoke these words. This is the passing of the torch. The Pendragon dynasty has completed its succession. At this moment, the sun had already risen, and its golden rays broke through the clouds, casting a direct light upon Artorius, enveloping the former prince and former king in a golden sheen. Observing this spectacle, the knights began to pay their respects. They made the sign of the cross over their chests and then knelt before Artorius Pendragon, their new king. Gawain, Lancelot, Lamorak, Bedivere, Tristan, one by one, knights with formidable power and unwavering convictions knelt before Artorius, their new ruler and the master of their souls. Please rise, father. Artorius calmly spoke these words and extended his hand to help Artoria rise. From this day forward, she was no longer a king. Please rise as well, esteemed knights of the Round Table. Artorius addressed the knights with a clear voice. As they slowly rose, their eyes filled with anticipation and unease. Artorius drew his sword and declared. With the dawn of this day, I ascend as the sovereign ruler of Britain, bearing the title of king. To my noble comrades, the valiant knights of the Round Table, I implore you to unite our strengths and rally behind me in our noble quest to rescue this world from perilous darkness. Together, let us forge a path toward a radiant future, unlocking the gates to a new era brimming with hope, justice, and prosperity. May our valorous endeavors echo through history, inspiring generations yet to come. For Britain, for honor, and for the world. Oh! Long live the king! The resounding cheers echoed through the heavens. Chapter 81, Dragon King Artorius Pendragon. Returning to Britain and Camelot at the fastest speed possible was the first thing Artorius did upon ascending the throne. Using magecraft, he swiftly spread the news of his ascension throughout all of Britain and requested that all the kings of the various kingdoms in Britain make their way to Camelot as quickly as possible for an audience. This news caused a slight disturbance among the kingdoms of Britain. The king of knights who had once held dominion over the other kingdoms in Britain, had actually abdicated. And that wicked dragon prince had become the new king of Britain? For a moment, the kings had various thoughts and considerations, but none dared to disobey the order. The king of knights was ruthless enough. Even though you're a king, and I'm also a king. I, as a king, have to listen to King Arthur. I can only call myself a king in my little corner, while King Arthur can call himself the King of Britain, representing the will of the entire country. Is that fair? At least the other kings thought it wasn't fair. The problem, however, was that they felt it was futile to complain. The two generations of monarchs in Camelot, Uther and Artoria, were content with the current state of affairs. Unfortunately, Artorius, as the newest generation, wanted to go further. I've had enough of Britain's division and the schemes of the nobles. In Camelot, Artorius spoke to the knights of the Round Table. Your Majesty, do you mean? I need a unified, consolidated Britain. Artorius answered one of the knights and declared. The resources and manpower wasted by the king's mutual distrust are meaningless and a waste of time. In today's Britain, the loose organization and internal strife among the kingdoms are among the significant causes of our chaos and suffering. I don't want to continue wasting our efforts in this regard. I will order them, in the name of the King of Britain, to surrender their entire armies, accept the laws of Camelot, and regularly provide a sufficient tribute to Camelot. These tributes and armies will be deployed in the conquest of the continent of Europe. I will unite all of Britain to leave behind a prosperous empire for us and our descendants. The Dragon Prince the Dragon King, radiating with majesty, surveyed his surroundings, imbuing his will into the depths of every knight of the Round Table. This was Camelot, and this was the policy change following the transfer of power in Britain. Different from Artoria, Artorius would take a more active role in manipulating and harnessing the power and authority of Britain, dedicating it to the wars on the continent. No longer will it be based on persuasion and voluntarism when he was a prince. It would become state policy, driven by power. Among the members of the Knights of the Round Table, some were excited, while others felt a slight unease. But whether excited or uneasy, they all obeyed Artorius's orders. The authority of the new king surpasses even that of the previous king. We cannot refuse His Majesty's orders. Ever since that day on the banks of the Seine, when His Majesty received the power of the Holy Grail. His Majesty is invincible, in both strength and vision, surpassing everything. The Knights of the Round Table discussed among themselves in private. They held cautious optimism about Artorius's transformation. But, Your Majesty. Afterward, Lancelot, who had come rushing from Gaul and continued to pledge allegiance to the Pendragon, asked, what if those kings refuse? What then? Regarding this, Artorius curled his lips. Simple. Artorius said calmly. Gather a legion from the Germanic military region. Artorius spoke calmly, but everyone could sense the strong scent of blood within his words. Some people couldn't help but subconsciously glance at Artorius's side. At his side, Morgan looked at him with fanatical eyes. Ever since Artorius ascended to the throne of Britain 3 days ago, she had been following him. Her gaze toward him had been increasingly strange. And on Artorius's other side stood the former king, Artoria. Instead of retiring, she chose to join Artorius's ranks as a knight. This action, as well as her presence, also served as a stabilizing factor for the Knights of the Round Table. Some knights who were not overly loyal to Artorius or disagreed with his actions could still obey his commands unconditionally because of her presence. But the former king's hair seems to have subtly changed color. It was strange to some people. Artoria's hair used to be bright gold, but recently, its color had become paler, resembling light gold. Well, those knights who noticed this were a tiny minority. Most knights weren't that bored to pay attention to such minor details. After Artorius finished speaking about Legion, everyone turned their gaze towards the former king, Artoria. They saw her with a serious expression, devoid of surprise, hesitation, or any other negative emotions. This proved that she fully supported Artorius's plan without any hesitation or resistance. King, former king, you have indeed changed. That was the thoughts of every knight that was loyal to the former king, King Arthur. Very well, my knights. Continue with your preparations. 3 days from now, I shall host a grand banquet in Camelot, where all these so-called kings shall be brought to account if they fail to attend. It will be the knights of the Round Table who shall carry out their punishment. Yes, your majesty. As Artorius waved his hand, issuing his final command, the knights of the Round Table, each with their own thoughts, were instantly infected by his words. Regardless, they would all pledge their loyalty to Artorius Pendragon, their new king. The meeting came to an end. Artorius calmly turned around, leaving the throne that belonged to the King of Britain, and headed towards the study that once belonged to his mother. By his side were Artoria, who considered herself his guardian and never left his side, and Morgan, who inexplicably didn't want to leave his side, as well as Bedivere, acting as the court steward and government official of Camelot. Your Majesty. The handsome knight spoke with a gentle and somewhat concerned voice. Camelot is facing food shortages in 15 villages, with 3 of them experiencing extreme scarcity. Don't worry, food will continuously be imported from the continent, but there are conditions. Those villages must send people to join my army. Artorius said calmly. But in their manpower. Even if they lack young men, it's fine. They can work in logistics, transporting supplies, repairing roads and dikes. In short, they need to work to sustain themselves. Yes, Your Majesty. Bedivere nodded. Regarding the coronation ceremony in 3 days. Keep it simple. Artorius replied. Spend as little money as possible. As for grandeur, let those kings witness the elite soldiers and strong warriors under the banner of Camelot. Grandeur will naturally follow. Yes, Your Majesty. And there is also. Bedivere said again. What else? Speak up all at once, don't keep me waiting. Artorius said impatiently. Bedivere's ability to handle affairs was indeed strong, but his indecisive nature meant he was more suited to be an adjutant rather than an official in charge. It's about Sir Galahad's funeral and the selection of a burial site. Upon hearing this, Artorius fell silent for a moment. Then, with an unquestionable tone, he answered. Do it in the Mainz Cathedral. I will build a mausoleum there for the Empire's soldiers. Chapter 82, Origin and Truth. The military honor, award system, military rank system, and military cemetery, all of these began to be promoted in the Germanic military region under Artorius's control. When compared to being buried in family graveyards, soldiers indeed preferred to be reunited with their comrades, even in death, and continue the fight together. Located on the outskirts of Mainz, the vast and solemn military cemetery was an essential part of instilling a sense of military honor and spirit. After finishing all the official business, Bedivere quickly ran off. Though he lacked decisive abilities, his competence in handling tasks was reliable. In the study room of Camelot, sitting on the chair that originally belonged to his mother, Artorius slowly closed his eyes. Just a little rest, a short moment. His physical exhaustion wasn't too significant, but unexpectedly, his mind felt uneasy. While he contemplated this, someone reached out from behind and began gently massaging Artorius's shoulders. The technique was skillful, relieving his muscle fatigue and, more importantly, easing his spirit. Thank you so much, Morgan. Artorius said, opening his eyes and turning around to express his gratitude. Then came a sound that seemed like anger and an astonished voice of "Hey!" Artorius turned his head to look and realized that the person who had just given him the massage was not the imagined Morgan but his mother, Artoria. Morgan stood not far from her, looking at Artorius and Artoria with a gaze that held envy, jealousy, hatred, and incomprehensible surprise, as if finding it hard to believe such a thing could happen. On the other hand, his mother, after a slight surprise, regained a calm expression. "You've worked hard, Artorius," Artoria calmly said to him, completely disregarding the envious and resentful gaze of her sister beside her. Artorius couldn't help but feel a slight sense of pride and joy in his mother's tone. "It's nothing to work hard for. It's just a matter of duty. Though you say that, back then, I wasn't as outstanding as you. I struggled with handling official affairs." "Is that so?" Artorius closed his eyes again. "I thought father wouldn't support my future plans." "Why not?" Artoria said to him, "As per our agreement, the Holy Grail plan has already failed. There are no more miracles or fantasies to rely on. As you said, now if we want to save Britain, we must be down to earth. If we want to save Britain, know the world, we must work even harder. We may even have to sacrifice some things." At this point, she paused. 2 days ago, after witnessing the actions of Sir Galahad, and you, I secretly made up my mind. I will support you, support your dreams and plans, and help you without reservation, my child. I will contribute all my power to assist you in fulfilling your grand ambition of saving the world and humanity." "Thank you, father, really." Artorius felt slightly comforted by her words. "There's no need to thank me," Artoria said while reaching out once again to massage his temples. "I'm just regretful that I didn't come earlier when that happened." "Please don't mention that," Artorius interrupted her. "We're still together, and we'll continue moving forward, carrying Galahad's will with us." "Yes." Artoria nodded. "What I wanted to say is, if it were me, I could do it too. I could sacrifice myself for you. But I don't want that," Artorius said. "I don't want anyone else to sacrifice any more, no more." As Artorius said this, he held his mother's hand, feeling the gentleness beneath his seemingly strong facade. Artoria's lips curled up, revealing a tender smile. Yet, she leaned forward, resting against Artorius's back. The scene appeared very heartwarming. I know, Artorius, my child. You are the best choice, the best savior," Artoria said gently to her beloved son. She said what she did for a reason that Artorius knew well. It was about his origin. On the way back to Camelot, she finally confessed this secret to Artorius. Just as Artorius had suspected, he wasn't a child born in the normal way. The question he had always pondered since he was reincarnated was, who is my mother or father? He was feeling confused and lost. Was Artoria his father by using magecraft to become a pseudo-male and using her sperm, similar to how Mordred was born? Or was Artoria his mother by genuinely giving birth to him, which means he had a real father? All the previous answers were wrong. It wasn't Guinevere, nor Morgan, or any women and any men. It was someone who never existed from the beginning. He, too, was created, a man-made savior like Artoria herself. Many years ago, his grandfather, King Uther, created Artoria and felt deeply uneasy. On one hand, it was about the baby's gender, and on the other, doubt. Was this savior, created in such a way, really okay? Could she truly save Britain? His unease troubled him and led him to make a decision. To create another being, a stronger and greater child with a different method. That was Artorius. Using a better and more powerful heart of the red dragon and factor of dragon, while also adding new concepts to Artoria's original template. Ambition, desire, power, warfare, politics, and of course, the most essential, justice. After all these concepts were set, what Merlin acquired were the souls from 1,500 years in the future, originating from who knows where, through means almost akin to true magic and miracles. Blending all these perfectly would create a savior even more perfect than Artoria. In terms of bloodline, Artorius had no connection to Artoria at all. Meaning, they were not related by blood. Yet, in terms of concept, he still belonged to Pendragon. That was Artorius Pendragon. That's why, Artorius, you are a more perfect savior than me. After revealing this secret to Artorius, Artoria became somewhat excited. Why, she always said he was more perfect than herself. Now, it made sense. She had no hint of jealousy towards Artorius at all, who was superior to her. She was simply filled with excitement and happiness. In recent years, I've been thinking, have I done enough? Have I done good? Can I truly save Britain? My conclusion is no, I haven't done enough, not good enough, not plentiful enough. In the end, I fear I won't be able to save Britain even though I've been trying my best. But, Artorius, you are different. Your talent surpasses mine. You can accomplish things I can't do easily. You understand human feelings, you comprehend governance, economics, and agriculture, and you can ignite the passions of everyone. This was one of the reasons Artoria willingly stepped down from the throne upon Artorius's request. It wasn't just because her efforts had ultimately failed. It was also because she deeply understood Artorius's capabilities. The gap between father and son was now completely stopped. The era of the King of Knights came to an end. Now, she was simply a knight fighting wholeheartedly for her beloved son. Artorius also enjoyed this relationship. He relished Artoria's love and care for him. It compensated for the years they had spent apart, rarely seeing each other. It would be perfect if Morgan weren't present though. So, what should we do next? On the way back to Camelot, Artorius had already explained his plan to usurp fate to Artoria. After their tender moment, it was time to discuss the matter at hand. I've obtained all the necessary parts. Artorius appeared confident. Even though the imaginary Holy Grail was used, I obtained the power of the true Holy Grail. Now, I'm like a human-shaped miniature Holy Grail. Really? Can you fulfill wishes? Of course. Artorius replied. To a certain extent, I can fulfill any wish. He wasn't lying. With Galahad's help before his death, Artorius absorbed some of the power of the Holy Grail, and both his body and soul were evolving. According to Morgan's calculations, the strength of his soul and the magical energy it contained surpassed the limits of phantasmal species. What's more important is that even in this state, Artorius was still considered human rather than a phantasmal species or a god, allowing him to continue existing in the surface world. In other words, true magic. If his speculation was correct, he possessed the third magic, heavens feel the materialization of the soul. As he said this, Artorius reached out his hand, and to Artoria's astonished gaze, Sword of Selection Caliban appeared in his grasp. It was a genuine, magical, A-rank noble phantasm capable of firing a sword beam. Unbelievable. Seeing this scene, Artoria couldn't help but widen her eyes. You can do something like this? Yes. Artorius nodded, paying no attention to Morgan, who was swallowing her saliva nearby. So, I now possess the immense magical energy required to activate the spell. I've also found 4 people who can assist me in completing the spell. After that, it's time to usurp fate. Upon saying this, Artorius stood up, glanced at Artoria, and then at Morgan. Tonight, I will take you both to a certain place. Artoria, Morgan, hey. The former had a serious expression, while the latter looked at Artorius with eyes that seemed to say, "This pervert and scumbag. You had promised me various things before we departed for the Holy Grail, but look at how it has turned out now. You rascal, are you not satisfied with me alone? Do you actually lust after your own mother, Artoria? And you even want to do me and Artoria together? How wicked, shameless, and degenerate. I love it. He he he." Morgan maintained a calm demeanor on the surface but secretly swallowed her saliva. Chapter 83, Misunderstanding. Next, it was time for the heartwarming dinner at the Pendragon residence. 4 women and 1 man. It was evident that everyone except Artorius was female. The House of Pendragon displayed a situation of decline and decay, causing some concerns about the future of this once glorious European lineage. Artorius was still the one who provided the dinner, with Artoria, Mordred, and Morgan joining him at the table. Morgan and Artoria sat closest to Artorius, with Guinevere and Mordred sitting beside them. This made Mordred a bit uneasy because when Artorius was still a prince, they used to sit together during meals. Now that he had become a king, it seemed like her status had diminished. "Stupid Mordred, you should have gotten married earlier," Mordred muttered frustratedly. As the truth unfolded that Artorius was Mordred's conceptual big brother without any blood relation, she felt bolder than ever. She even started fantasizing about various things that may or may not happen. However, little did she know that she was not the only one in the House of Pendragon who coveted the newly appointed patriarch, Artorius. During this dinner, facing the various delicacies provided by Artorius, Artoria was not as revolting as before. She no longer ate her black bread in solitude as if she were being bullied. Completely liberated, she now hung on to his every word, like another Mordred. Her gaze toward Artorius was even more gentle than that of his nominal mother, Guinevere. On the other side, Morgan's obsession with Artorius had also reached new heights. Previously, she liked Artorius for his temperament, his wickedness, and his abilities. She liked his glorious and handsome appearance. But now, she had an unparalleled and fanatical adoration for Artorius Pendragon's aura as a king. Ah! So that's how it is. In reality, bad girls may indeed like bad boys. But in comparison, bad girls actually prefer good boys a bit more. Artorius naturally felt the passionate adoration the Pendragon women had for him. After all, he wasn't a dense protagonist from those Japanese light novels. But, he was equally aware of the danger ingrained in their fervent love. It was a terror that could easily lead to their own demise if he was careless. But so what? As the savior, Artorius had long set aside thoughts of life and death. He didn't give a fuck anymore. After we finish dinner, follow me, Artorius said, putting down his utensils and wiping his mouth with a napkin. He looked at the Pendragon women, who were devouring their food as if they were participating in a competitive eating contest, and continued, I have something to discuss with all of you. Morgan. Artoria. Mordred. Ignoring the strange expressions on the faces of the Pendragon women, Artorius stood up and strode purposefully toward his room, also calling for Gareth, who was still diligently studying. The girl's heart felt heavy. After all, Galahad was not only Artorius's friend but also her own, someone who had been with them since childhood. Now that Galahad's soul had departed to heaven, the girl naturally felt deep sorrow. However, she didn't want to show this grief in front of Artorius. She had to put on a brave smile and ensure her sadness didn't affect his judgment. After all, Artorius is now a king. I have something to say. Gareth gathered her courage and confessed her feelings to Artorius. I can also devote myself to your majesty, just like Sir Galahad. Artorius nodded approvingly. Very well, I can sense your determination. After receiving Artorius's praise, Gareth hadn't even had a chance to be happy when she heard him say, come to my bedroom tonight. Gareth. After saying those words, Artorius turned around and walked away briskly, leaving the wolf girl standing there in bewilderment. Although I expected this. But isn't this progressing too quickly? The girl stood frozen in place, soon, her head quickly steaming like crazy. And then, right after that, along with her mother, little sister, and aunt, she felt deeply embarrassed due to misunderstanding the words of Artorius. When they all appeared together in the land of shadows, even fools could understand that Artorius didn't mean what they thought. This was an important base for Artorius to carry out his plan of usurping fate. Bringing them here was to help them better assist him and join this plan. Gareth was to undergo training in spearmanship under the tutelage of Scathatch, to strengthen herself. Mordred was to do the same. Artoria and Morgan were to be involved in Artorius's plan, particularly Morgan, as she was chosen as one of the executors of the Fate Usurper spell. Among the other executors were the Lady of the Lake, Vivian, and Merlin. Although Artorius wasn't particularly keen on having Merlin around, he called him nonetheless for the sake of caution, better be safe than sorry. With so many people arriving at once, the previously silent land of shadows became lively. But as Scathatch looked at the newcomers, her mood became somewhat complicated. Does this kid see me as a useful tool? She couldn't help but think like that. There's another new child for me to teach again. He won't keep dragging me into teaching from now on, will he? Of course, there was something even more surprising to her than that. And that was Artorius's transformation. Before that, the Artorius she had seen had no fundamental difference from ordinary youngsters. A bit cunning, a bit arrogant, wanting to achieve something great, wanting success and fame. But at the same time, he was somewhat lost, not knowing where his true path lay. Now, as the age of gods started to end, she actually didn't want to get involved with such a person anymore. However, Artorius's talent was simply too good to be ignored. It would be a great pity to just let him go. So, she held her nose and reluctantly agreed to his nonsensical demand. But now, Artorius's appearance surprised her. It wasn't just his talent and strength. Artorius's spirit and soul had also fully matured. His soul was so brilliant, so dazzling, so bright, that Scathatch couldn't help but marvel at it. In just a few days we didn't meet, you've become quite a great man. Scathatch exclaimed. Looking at Artorius's resolute gaze, Scathatch was briefly taken aback, and then she sighed, I originally thought it would take you some time to find your own path. It's not time that changes a person, but circumstances. Artorius calmly replied. I met someone who could change my life, and that confirmed what was in my heart. It's as simple as that. I see. Scathatch nodded again. So, can you give me an answer now? Yes, I can. Artorius nodded. But before that, I also want to ask you something, teacher. Would you be willing to sacrifice your life for something or someone? Can I answer your question a little later? Of course. Artorius nodded and then turned to the people he had brought along. Now, everyone, please share your thoughts too about my question earlier. What are the things you are willing to sacrifice for? Would you be willing to sacrifice your life for that? Chapter 84, Answers and Delusion. Artorius nodded and then turned to the people he had brought along. Now, everyone, please share your thoughts too about my question earlier. What are the things you are willing to sacrifice for? Would you be willing to sacrifice your life for that? Of course. Mordred was the first to speak up, saying, I'm willing to give everything for my big brother. Without hesitation, and even with a touch of pride, she confidently addressed Artorius, saying, whether it's my life or anything else, whatever it may be, I'm willing to do it for my big brother. Thank you, little Mo. Upon hearing Mordred's words, although Artorius already knew her feelings, he still smiled gently and affectionately stroked Mordred's hair, thanking her tenderly. He didn't expect all his colleagues, subordinates and allies to have the same determination as her. As long as they could fight side by side with him, that was enough. The reasons for fighting together were not too important. Whether it was for ideals, ambitions, or even for themselves, as long as they could lend their strength to him, it was enough. Of course, during this process, Artorius would also impart wisdom to them and lead by example, helping them understand right from wrong. Given enough time and Artorius's influence, they too could become human warriors and heroes with purposes and a sense of responsibility, just like how he changed after the Holy Grail incident. Mordred was like that, and Gareth was undoubtedly the same. After Mordred spoke up and gave her answer, Gareth looked at how Artorius praising Mordred. She couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration and disappointment when witnessing them. Mordred got ahead of me again. Gareth couldn't help but think that way and involuntarily recalled 2 years ago, when she eagerly followed Artorius to Europe, the day after their first victory and after the banquet. Because Artorius woke up late, she became curious and worried and went to wake him up. However, she discovered that Mordred was already inside his tent. At that time, the wolf girl was still unclear and didn't fully understand. But today, 2 years later, she understood completely. However, I'm the same. Gareth said her answer to Artorius. Although she believed that her beliefs and willpower would never lose to Mordred, it didn't matter. Everyone always remembers the first place, the one who receives praise, but who remembers the second place? So, after saying those words, she felt very disheartened. It wasn't until Artorius reached out his hand and gently stroked her hair and met her confused gaze. I understand. He kindly said to Gareth. I understand your feelings, Gareth. So he knows my feelings. He responded to my feelings. In an instant, the heart of the wolf girl was filled with excitement and thrill. While comforting the girl, Artorius exchanged a glance with Artoria. They had reached such a level of understanding that everything went unspoken. She didn't need to express her feelings, Artorius could understand her heart. If Morgan were to witness this scene, she would undoubtedly be seething with jealousy. The once vengeful enchantress, the mad and wicked witch, had pretty much lost her edge by now. Perhaps she would continue to struggle and make some fuss in the future. But the chances of her success were infinitely close to zero. As for the present, she was currently locking eyes with Vivian, locked in a staring contest. Meeting enemies only fueled greater resentment, especially when old grudges and new enmity were combined. Old grudges were easy to understand. Morgan and Vivian had always had a terrible relationship. It was the kind of love-hate bond. Vivian represented the Lady of the Lake, while Morgan was the opposite of the Lady of the Lake. Their relationship was like ice and fire, good and evil, Jedi and Sith, Harry Potter and Voldemort. They were destined to walk different paths, destined to be archenemies. As for the new enmity, it dates back to just a few minutes ago. Before heading to the Land of Shadows, Artorius had first met up with Vivian in Avalon. Upon seeing Vivian, her eyes were immediately fixated on Artorius, ignoring everyone else. She rushed towards him as usual, attempting to embrace him while making strange noises, wanting to welcome the attractive boy with the usual face wash. Artoria. Mordred. Gareth. Among the Pendragon women, the one who was closest to Artorius and reacted the fastest was Morgan. She stepped forward, positioning herself in front of Artorius, shielding him. Morgan Le Fay. Seeing her archenemy, Vivian quickly entered a state of readiness. Morgan was almost the same. She looked at Vivian pouncing towards Artorius and felt very displeased. In return, Vivian watched as Morgan shielded Artorius and felt a similar itch of hatred. How could you? How could you do this? Vivian said with anger. What did I do? What's wrong with it? Morgan said smugly. Although it wasn't actually the case, it didn't stop Morgan from assuming a triumphant pose. This attitude made Vivian even angrier. Damn you! You, how dare you! Let go of Artorius! What if I don't? As Morgan was about to continue enjoying her dominance and delightful moment, she suddenly realized that Artorius had disappeared. To be more precise, he had positioned himself between the two of them. And he was floating, at a height higher than Morgan and Vivian, allowing him to overlook them condescendingly. Have you two had enough of your fussing? The majesty and aura of the Dragon King immediately silenced the two embarrassed big sisters. Is this the time to be fooling around? But... Artorius. No buts. Today is the first day of our plan to usurp fate, and I don't want any unexpected incidents. Otherwise, you know what will happen. He glanced at Morgan and then at Vivian. Seeing that both of them had fallen silent, although there was still some reluctance, they managed to maintain a fake and superficial sisterly appearance. Artorius nodded in satisfaction. Very well. Artorius said, smiling. Now, let's shake hands. With a smile, he took hold of Morgan and Vivian's hands. He forcibly brought the reluctant ladies of the lake together, making them clasp hands and reconcile. They could only make silly faces like children when Artorius couldn't see. Morgan. What? Upon hearing Artorius's emotionless voice, Morgan couldn't help but shiver like a mouse hearing a cat's meow. Do you have an answer to my question? Artorius looked at her, noticing that she hadn't been paying serious attention, but he didn't mind. He repeated the question. When it came to this matter, Artoria accepted him as he was, while Mordred and Gareth regarded him with great respect. As for the Knights of the Round Table, Artorius had the ability to ensure their loyalty. However, it wasn't enough to have good people, Artorius also needed a sample of the bad. And among the people he knew, Morgan was the worst. He was eagerly anticipating her response. Sure enough, after Artorius asked the question, Morgan gave him a look as if to say, "Are you an idiot? How is that possible?" Then she spoke in a manner befitting a villain. The most important thing in this world is one's own life. How could there be anything more important than that? Sacrifice? No way. I see. Morgan's words didn't surprise Artorius. Indeed, not everyone in this world is willing to sacrifice their life for something. That was only natural and didn't disappoint him, he was like that before. Everything is within my calculations. I can confide in those who share the same ideals, but for someone like Morgan, I can only use power, authority, and self-interest to win her over and exploit her. That's what Artorius thought, while Morgan began to doubt herself. She secretly felt that she might have misspoken. What does he mean by asking me this question? Could it be that he's testing me? As she pondered, Morgan carefully observed Artorius. While the Dragon King remained calm internally and maintained a serious demeanor on the surface, Morgan wasn't Artoria, so she couldn't read his inner thoughts, only noticing his serious expression. Indeed, he is testing me. She further contemplated what was he testing her for? By asking this question, could it be? With these thoughts in mind, Morgan entered a state of imagination, trying to figure out the reason behind his test. He asked me what is more important than life. What could be more important than life? Why did he ask me this question? Could it be? Could it be that he likes me? Morgan was surprised, flustered, and struggled to accept it. She interpreted Artorius's question as a veiled confession of love. No, calm down, Morgan Le Fay. She continued to say to herself. Although all the evidence points to the option he likes me, it's not absolute. So, I need to sort out my thoughts and think carefully. Artorius, is there anything more important than life? Morgan, life is precious, but love is even more valuable. Artorius, then who do you love, Morgan Le Fay? Morgan, it's you, silly. Artorius, oh, stop it, Morgan, don't tease me. Morgan, no, really, I really like you, Artorius. Artorius, Morgan. Morgan, Artorius. And then, a happy ending. Morgan's contemplation came to an end. HMHMHMGH. Artorius prepared to proceed, but he heard strange laughter coming from beside him. He turned to see Morgan with a twisted expression as if struggling to hold back her laughter. It puzzled him. What's wrong with her? Why is she laughing in such a bizarre manner so suddenly? Has she gone insane? She's always been a shady and wicked woman. The only thing she's good for is her intellect. If her mind deteriorates any further, she'll be of no use for my plan. Artorius was concerned, but Morgan didn't notice. She was still immersed in her own world, with an uplifted mood and an increased pace of imaginative thoughts. What a stubborn guy, Sundara. He likes me but doesn't dare to say it directly, so he expresses it with these puzzling questions. Really, I'm fortunate to be intelligent. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to decipher his eccentric confession. Honestly, this guy, if he wants to confess, he should be more straightforward and show more affection. Just say it directly like Morgan, I like you. Then dive into my arms and nuzzle against me. Seriously, he's such a gentle and handsome boy. He shouldn't be wearing that wicked smile all the time, pretending to be a villain boss. Oh, right, he actually is a villain boss. But wait, yes, my answer. At this point, Morgan suddenly realized that her answer wasn't appropriate. She answered Artorius's question with the most important thing in this world is one's own life. By doing so, she had essentially rejected his confession, hadn't she? What did I do? Does that mean Morgan realized that she had just sabotaged her own happiness. She could have had a happy ending with Artorius, living together in bliss, experiencing various moments every day. Together, they could have conquered the world, eliminating all the scum who dared to oppose them. If only she had just told him even a woman like me has something more important than my own life. But she didn't. Fool! Why didn't I think it through? No, I need to calm down. There might still be a chance to fix the situation. First, let's see his reaction. With these thoughts, Morgan carefully observed Artorius. Although Artorius's current expression seemed normal, just like the usual sunny and innocent youth, but with an additional aura of majesty. However, there existed the idiom of suspect the neighbor of stealing an axe. T/N, an idiom of being subjective instead of objective and giving judgment without evidence and facts. That idiom represented Morgan right now. In short, she was delusional. Morgan, who had something on her mind, couldn't help but feel that Artorius was concealing his disappointment. If it weren't for the dignity of his eventual leader status, he would have already covered his face and burst into tears. He actually likes me so much. Ah, what should I do? What should I do? Morgan, happiness is within your reach, but now it seems that the door to happiness is closing. Should I save my face or my happiness? Then, she came to a decision. Just a moment. Morgan hastily said. Is there something else? Artorius asked puzzled. Actually, earlier, my answer to your question wasn't honest. Artorius looked at Morgan with a somewhat strange expression. So, what I mean is... She looked at Artorius seriously and delivered the lines she had already rehearsed in her mind. Even a woman like me has something more important than my own life. After saying these words, Morgan gazed earnestly at Artorius. It wasn't until he broke into a smile, blossoming like 1,000 flowers, that she breathed a sigh of relief. I understand. Thank you for the answer. Chapter 85, True Nature. She looked at Artorius seriously and delivered the lines she had already rehearsed in her mind. Even a woman like me has something more important than my own life. After saying these words, Morgan gazed earnestly at Artorius. It wasn't until he broke into a smile, blossoming like 1,000 flowers, that she breathed a sigh of relief. I understand. Thank you for the answer. Morgan, I can't believe it. I actually said that. Artorius, even someone like Morgan is willing to sacrifice for the greater good. Their thought processes and what they were contemplating were completely different. Yet, their emotions were surprisingly aligned. They both felt relieved and pleasantly surprised. As they looked into each other's eyes, emotions began to blossom, leaving the others around them perplexed. Artorius expressed astonishment and joy, which was easy to understand. But Morgan, why was she so delighted? Wasn't she the antagonist? Why would she go through fire and water for Artorius, to save the world? Has she lost her mind? Upon witnessing this, Artoria instinctively looked at Merlin, hoping her mentor would provide answers. However, the incubus, who couldn't comprehend human hearts, remained oblivious. He shrugged his shoulders, assuming a helpless expression. His lack of understanding was contrasting with everyone else's. Being able to observe the fate of those before him through clairvoyance, he understood Morgan's heart very well. Where is the vengeful witch of Britain? Laughable. She's obviously just a silly girl who's fallen in love. And what surprised me is, the progress between them is this fast. He could happily enjoy the banter between Morgan and Artorius. But what Artorius was thinking, Merlin had no idea. Due to Artorius's immense power and the uniqueness of his soul, Merlin couldn't foresee his future. He couldn't have anticipated that the soul he had stolen on a whim, with mischievous intent, would turn out to be so extraordinary. Taking something without permission is considered theft. By deceiving the cycle of death without the consent of the rightful owner, he utilized the soul. It was a rather evil act. Only an incubus like him who was ignorant of right and wrong, could do so without any burden. In this regard, Merlin's nature was even worse than Morgan's creation of individuals like Mordred. The artificial souls created by Morgan were obtained through the proper reincarnation of nature. There were no crimes committed against the manipulation of souls. You see, when I said I can't see your future, that's not a lie. Only you, Artorius, only you, I cannot see clearly. The inability to see clearly and face the unknown leads to confusion, resistance, and fear. It's a common condition among intelligent beings, and Merlin acquired and imitated these emotions from humans. For these reasons, Merlin had always subconsciously resisted getting too close to Artorius. Even when they met, he was unwilling to say too much. This situation persisted until now. You've become the perfect savior, surpassing even Artoria. Not just on the scale of Britain, but Europe, and possibly even reaching the level of the world and humanity. It's truly something to look forward to. How far will the final version of you go? Merlin is incredibly eager for it. Unlike a disciple who was taught step by him like Artoria who was like his daughter, the incubus's attachment to Artorius leaned more toward the relationship between an artist and their work. It wasn't the dedication of an artist pouring their heart and emotions into creating a masterpiece. It was more like a mischievous child haphazardly building a sand castle. Today it might seem cherished, like the apple of their eye, but in the blink of an eye, they might ignore it or even deliberately stomp on it, reveling in the innocent smile that accompanies the destruction of the sand castle. Different from Artorius Pendragon, who awakened his sense of justice in the Holy Grail incident. When Merlin witnessed Galahad willingly sacrificing himself, there was no fluctuation in his heart at all, he even felt a slight urge to laugh when witnessed the spectacle. The present incubus still couldn't grasp human hearts. In the original history, it was Artoria's very tragic fate that touched him, propelling him from a demon to a human. But now, whether this step can still be taken or not, no one knows. That's why Artorius doesn't trust Merlin. Unlike other knights who disliked Merlin due to his behavior and actions, Artorius saw through his true nature. A being that seeks pleasure, lacks humanity, and imitates human emotions. Such existence can be used but never trusted. What we're going to discuss is the future, the first step to saving humanity. Artorius spoke confidently in the corridors of the Black Castle. Meanwhile, Mordred and Gareth, left behind on the training grounds, watched everyone's retreating figures with envy. Merlin, however, was surprised. Hey, Artorius! Have you forgotten something? Didn't you ask a question? I haven't answered yet. Is it necessary? Artorius countered. Your answer would surely be no, right? How can you falsely accuse me like that? I am going to be angry, you know. Merlin appeared agitated. You didn't even ask, how could you know I would refuse? Look at Morgan, for example. She seems like a villain, even the boss of the villains. Did you consider the possibility that she would agree with you? No, right? So why can't it be the same for me? Can't you have some faith in me? Continuing to argue with this idiot wouldn't get them anywhere. Artorius didn't have so much time to waste. So Artorius decided to be direct. Then tell me, are you willing to sacrifice your life for something? Of course not. Artorius took a deep breath with clenched palms, suppressing the desire to tear Merlin apart. Let's go. He decided that from now on, he would ignore whatever Merlin babbled about. With this resolution, the group arrived at the meeting room in the Black Castle. At the entrance, Artorius exchanged a glance with Scathatch. She didn't express disagreement, so he took it as approval. With a single thought, Artorius transformed the layout and furnishings of the meeting room. Under the violet glow of magical lights, they settled into chairs that shimmered like obsidian. In front of them stood a massive round table, similar in style to Camelot but black-purple in color. "It looks nice," Scathatch remarked in a relaxed tone. "I'm glad you like it, teacher." Artorius smiled. The Holy Grail not only increased his strength and broadened his horizons, but it also made him more straightforward and bold when dealing with women. His desires and lust hadn't diminished, in fact, they had somewhat intensified. However, he didn't have so much time in Rome to engage in romantic flirting with women. His main time and energy were dedicated to his plan of saving the world and humanity by conquest. He needed to manage his time well. So when it came to women, he preferred simplicity over complexity. If he could skip kissing and go straight to taking off his pants, he would. Speed and efficiency were crucial, even in intimate relationships. And so, the meeting began for the Dragon King and his loyal followers, centered around the mission of saving the world and humanity, in the newly arranged conference room bathed in the purple glow of magic. Chapter 86, Illuminati. In front of a round table that shone like amethyst, everyone took their seats. The Dragon King Artorius, without a doubt, occupied the head seat, radiating an aura of majesty as he surveyed his surroundings. "Everyone," Artorius began, his voice steady and powerful. "I won't waste words with unnecessary talk. You all know why we've gathered here. A common and great goal has united us, pushing aside our prejudices and solidifying our determination. That goal is the salvation of humankind. Therefore, I've named our assembly the Illuminati, hoping that we can ignite ourselves to illuminate the path for humanity." Artorius's voice resonated with authority. "Our ultimate objective is to ensure the everlasting existence and prosperity of humanity. Our mission is to become their guardians and guides. To achieve this, we must bring the entirety of Europe under the rule of a single nation, facing the first challenge of uniting the Germanic peoples, including the Franks. As for the specifics, I believe you all have a good understanding. But, what about our specific targets?" Morgan interjected. "Could you be more precise about which group or individuals? After all, the Franks constitute a significant portion of the Germanic peoples, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. In specific terms, it is Clovis," Artorius stated, prompting everyone present to wear expressions of confirmation. For those familiar only with Type Moon, Frank would likely bring to mind Charlemagne, as well as Astolfo and Brad Amant. Upon hearing the name Clovis, one would probably be perplexed, unaware of who he was. However, for those well-versed in European history, hearing that name would undoubtedly trigger a moment of realization, followed by a comment such as "Ah, that one." Clovis was the founder and first ruler of the Frankish kingdom. While the Franks reached their peak under Charlemagne's rule, the transformation from an ordinary Germanic tribe into a nation was led by Clovis. He led the Frankish tribe, vanquishing the Romans and the Visigoths, thereby establishing complete dominion over Gaul. This laid the groundwork for the further expansion and growth of the Franks. The king of the Frankish barbarians. It's only natural to think about it. Clovis's standing and significance in this world were beyond the scope of previous historical accounts. Embracing the great fate of the Germanic peoples, the formidable fate of the founder of the Frankish kingdom. This barbarian king had now grown into the greatest enemy of the Germanic military region. Artorius's sudden emergence, the establishment of the Germanic war zone under his leadership, and his simultaneously gentle and ruthless treatment of the Germanic peoples rapidly fractured this fearsome nation. They were faced with a choice: either obey the orders of the great general Artorius, submit to the Red Dragon and the Black Eagle, transform from forest wolves into domesticated dogs, or join forces with the Frankish king Clovis, becoming part of his terrifying wolf pack. Under Artorius's pressure and attacks, the power of the Germanic peoples weakened compared to its historical state. However, in contrast, they grew more united and cohesive. Clovis, the leader of the Franks, became even more formidable than he was in history. All the Germanic peoples who desired a life of turmoil. All those who sought plunder and gain without effort, outnumbering those who sought rewards through effort among the Germanic peoples. Those who yearned for war, pillaging, and conquest among the Germanic peoples. those who thirsted for slaughter, annexation, and aspired to rise above the rest among the Germanic peoples. They were all gathering under Clovis's banner, becoming participants in the invasion of Gaul. After returning to the Germanic military region, I will launch the war. Artorius declared calmly. I will defeat him, crush him, and then usurp his fate. As Artorius spoke, his gaze swept over Vivian, Morgan, Scathatch, and Merlin one by one. Your goal is to ensure that, as I defeat Clovis, you simultaneously perform the spell to usurp his fate. It must be done at the same time, and this point must be guaranteed. Morgan, Vivian, Scathatch, and Merlin. When he uttered the final name, a flicker of disdain flashed through Artorius's eyes. You are the most outstanding mages in this world. It will be up to you to create the spell for usurping fate. Is there any problem? It can be completed within 3 months. Scathatch replied. But I will need a helper. Then, I entrust this matter entirely to you. Don't forget the promise you made to me. Of course. Artorius nodded. Someday, my spear will pierce through your body. Until then, put your intelligence and talents to good use in my service, teacher. Having completed this conversation, Scathatch closed her eyes, indicating that her task was finished and she would no longer speak. Now, Lady Morgan. Artorius turned his gaze toward Morgan. You. I believe your majesty needs a proper court mage by his side. Before Artorius could say anything, Morgan preemptively spoke. She said cheerfully, compared to lazy folk like Merlin who lazes around all day, I'm a better choice. Can't you consider it? But I need an envoy. Artorius said, I need a powerful mage to help me recruit people for the collaboration between the Atlas Academy and the Wandering Sea, as well as the establishment of the Third Mage Association. I need to concentrate enough mystery and research capabilities. Prepare for the future. Preparations after the Age of Gods ends and the mystery fades. Morgan asked. Yes. Artorius nodded, I need a magecraft system that can adapt and function even after true ether disappears. You've already mastered the third magic, or at least you're about to master it. Isn't that enough? Merlin asked with keen interest. Both personal strength and the strength of my people. I want both of those. Artorius replied. In that case, let me go. Merlin grinned and said, perfect timing. I happen to know quite a few excellent mages. Hearing him speak like that, Artorius fell silent. Merlin himself was indeed talented, and Artorius believed him when he said he knew outstanding mages. The only question was whether Merlin would be willing to work hard and seriously. No matter how Merlin pretended or said things like trust me, Artorius wouldn't believe him at all. For this matter, please let Sir Kay supervise. Artoria, who was by Artorius's side, spoke up, I believe we can achieve the goal. Very well. Artorius nodded. Next, Vivian. Yes, yes. The Fairy Queen seemed unable to fully adapt to Artorius's transformation, from a cute and gentle boy to such a majestic man. Although her heart was pounding, she also felt nervous. You will assist Scathatch. Can you do it? No, no problem. Vivian nodded. She felt a bit disappointed. As a fairy, she could no longer adapt to a world lacking true ether on the surface, so she could only stay in the land of shadows and couldn't be by Artorius's side like Morgan. It made her feel a bit disappointed. Now one couldn't see the slightest trace of her Yandere appearance from back then. Now, she looked obedient, like a junior high school girl. I'm counting on you then. Artorius said gently to her, making Vivian smile. With all the tasks properly assigned, Artorius surveyed his surroundings. He saw the elite members under his command. A small but exceptional group. The awakened Dragon King, the inhuman Incubus, the Fairy Queen, the vengeful Witch Queen, and the gatekeeper of the Land of Shadows. It could be said that talents were abundant. Seeing this, Artorius couldn't help but feel pleased. With so many big figures, how could he not succeed in his grand plan, the rise of humanity? With their help, he would destroy Gaia, slaughter the wandering stars, Felber, and crush the outer gods as easily as turning his hand. Breaking free from Earth, ruling the galaxy, and establishing a human universe was just a matter of time. Our future is full of light. In the dimly purple-lit meeting room, Artorius muttered. The future of humanity is also filled with light. Chapter 87, King's Meeting. The arrangements were in order, and Artorius turned around, heading towards the training grounds. Before the final battle arrived, he had to ensure that his strength reached perfection. Then. Got a moment. In the corridor, Artorius looked at Morgan, who had a smile on her face, as he calmly asked. Of course, I also have something to talk about. Looking at her smiling face, Artorius pondered for a moment. Was this woman going to demand his previous promise? If so, what should he do? Should he fulfill the promise or not? The physical exertion required could be disregarded since his magical energy was limitless. However, when it came to the aspect of time. Artorius, take a look at this. Continuing on, under Artoria's astonished gaze, Morgan produced a treasure. It was adorned with vibrant blue enamel decorations set on golden metal, with fairy writing in the center. It was Avalon, the ever-distant utopia. It was also the thing Artoria had lost recently. You are the one who stole it. Artoria exclaimed angrily. Yes, I'm sorry about that. Her apology lacked sincerity, causing Artoria to become even more furious, while Morgan continued to smile and look at Artorius. You're the king of Britain now, so this scabbard should be returned to its rightful owner. Even without Avalon, I can still heal quickly. Artorius said. But either way, I'll accept your gift. As he spoke, he drew his own sword, Excalibur sword of promised victory, and discarded the scabbard that replaced Avalon, replacing it with Avalon itself. He confirmed that he had obtained a considerably important asset. The true purpose of Avalon was never about quick recovery, it was an immensely powerful noble phantasm that possessed an absolute defensive ability akin to true magic. It was capable of even withstanding EA of that Goldie, the king of heroes. Following Artoria's abdication, Excalibur became Artorius's new weapon, while she chose the Holy Lance Rongominiad as a substitute. Artorius bestowed Clarent upon Mordred. Although Artorius was more familiar with Clarent, Excalibur had become the symbol of Britain's royal authority due to King Arthur. As long as you are happy with it. Looking at Artorius, who wore the holy sword, adorned with frost-colored armor and cloak, exuding an unparalleled heroic aura, the flames in Morgan's eyes grew even hotter. So. She almost forgot herself as she leaned closer. The promise you made to me before. I certainly remember. Artorius reached out, embracing her waist and pulling her into his arms without hesitation. Ignoring her surprised gaze, he spoke to her with a condescending, arrogant and aggressively assertive tone. Tonight, make yourself clean and wait for me. After uttering those words, he pushed Morgan away and left without a shred of remorse, leaving her alone, collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. Damn it! This man! He's truly... Morgan didn't know how to describe it. All she knew was that when Artorius held her, her heart raced intensely as if it were about to stop. At the same time. Artorius. Beside Artorius, Artoria hesitated with her words. Just say whatever you want to say, father. Artorius said without even looking back. Between you and Morgan. Morgan is useful. Her power is indispensable for our cause. And she's not the kind of person who can be swayed by words, ideals, or dreams. So, if we want her help, we have to find another way and pay a different price. Yes, I understand, but... as long as it accomplishes my plan, I'm willing to be crushed to dust from head to toe. Artorius's words were passionate and resolute, making Artoria feel ashamed and realize that she still had much to learn and improve upon. And his actions were consistent with his words. That very night, he stormed into Morgan's room without a second thought, raised his mighty dragon spear, and pierced her repeatedly until she fell lifeless. Faced with Artorius's fierce assault, Morgan initially tried to maintain her dominance. She provocatively spoke to Artorius like, My, are you that eager for your aunt's body, my little nephew? She actively fought back, but as the saying goes, good prevails over evil. Morgan's forces collapsed while Artorius remained invincible, slaying countless enemies. No matter how Morgan boasted and how wild she behaved, she ultimately fell beneath the shadow of the great dragon. She cried uncontrollably, wailing like a bullied little girl, constantly begging Artorius for mercy. However, due to her previous arrogance, he showed no intention of forgiving her. Thus, the next day, during breakfast in Camelot, Morgan was absent. Witnessing this scene, the knights of the Round Table in Camelot dared not speak or question. They simply carried out Artorius's commands efficiently. The kings from various countries of Britain were gradually arriving. The meeting of the kings of Britain was about to commence. The entire Camelot was restless, with soldiers and knights on edge. Artorius's wish to unite Britain had long been known through various channels. If the kings complied, all would be well. But if they refused, a civil war engulfing Britain would likely erupt. In such a situation, it became crucial to discern one's friends from foes, who would support them, and who would lead the opposition. Every day, Artorius discussed with the knights, privately communicated with the kings, dispatched envoys, tested each other, devised plans, formed alliances, and even resorted to assassination, threats, and kidnappings, all to ensure the realization of his desires. Until 3 days later, in the grand hall of the White Castle's throne room, Artorius sat high on the throne, overlooking all. Britain must unite. His voice was calm and indifferent. The territories must unite under the same banner. The kings had differing thoughts. Some were panting as if they were about to voice their strong opposition, while others had flickering eyes, contemplating their next moves. I promise you wealth, castles, and status. Artorius calmly surveyed the surroundings. But you must surrender your armies, people, cities, and territories. Unite everything under the banner of the Red Dragon. Only then. Impossible. At that moment, a furious voice interrupted Artorius. Chapter 88, United. A bonus chapter for every 1k power stones, thank you for the support. This guy hey. King Mark, who is also the uncle of Tristan. During the previous discussion, he was the most opposed to Artorius's policies. As expected. King Mark, wearing a golden crown, veins pulsating on his forehead, exclaimed, "On what grounds? Just because you say so, you want us to surrender everything." "On the grounds of saving Britain." Artorius calmly replied. "What nonsense righteousness! It's merely an excuse for your desire for power. You, this dragon, are worse than Vortigern back in the day." After uttering those words, he turned around and walked out of the meeting room, saying, "Whoever wants to be this kid's servant, go ahead. I'm leaving. From today onwards, I have nothing to do with any of this." He. Upon hearing this, Merlin, sitting beside the throne, couldn't help but laugh. Meanwhile, an arrow pierced through King Mark's back. "Tristan, you." King Mark lowered his head, recognizing the appearance of the arrow. He immediately identified the person who had shot him. "Why? To think, you'd personally kill your uncle who raised you." Behind him, the archer slowly lowered his bow, shaped like a harp. One of the most skilled archers among the Knights of the Round Table couldn't help but shed tears. "I'm saddened, truly, deeply saddened. You." One could say that he truly deserved to be the king in the age of gods. Even with an arrow piercing his heart, he didn't die. He still had the strength to roar in anger, the power to draw his sword, and charge towards Tristan. Witnessing this scene, many Knights of the Round Table couldn't help but draw their swords. "Don't move, all of you!" Tristan shouted in anger. "Listen to him." Artorius also supported him. "It is crucial to unify the power of Britain. Anyone opposing the will of His Majesty must be eliminated. As a knight serving His Majesty, I must remain loyal to my duty, even if the opponent is my uncle." Tristan said those words as he pondered in his heart the conversation he had with his king, Artorius, before this. During the discussion, they debated which kings could be swayed, and which ones would strongly oppose. Among the kings who strongly opposed was King Mark. Therefore, after the meeting ended and while Tristan was still worried about it, Artorius had already found him and asked for his opinion on the matter. The sorrowful knight became even more sorrowful. He couldn't help but ask a naive question: isn't it possible to achieve reform without resorting to this? Not long after asking this question, Artorius convinced him. Under the tremendous pressure of their country's destruction and with Artorius balancing it with his speeches of righteousness, Tristan decided to continue following Artorius. However, he didn't expect that afterward, Artorius would say something like this: "I can spare King Mark. For you, Sir Tristan. Also for the unity of the Knights of the Round Table. For the bond between us. But." Hearing Artorius say this, Tristan realized that he didn't feel excited or joyful within himself, only guilt and self-reproach. "It will be unfair." Tristan looked at Artorius in astonishment. "If only my uncle is pardoned, what about the other kings?" "No, among the other kings, many have connections with the Knights of the Round Table. If only my uncle is forgiven, what about the other comrades of the Knights of the Round Table?" "That, indeed is true, but..." Tristan saw the king's wavering, his struggle, his helplessness, his sadness. His Majesty's sadness is not inferior to mine. I can't burden His Majesty. I must make a decision. With these thoughts in mind, the finest archer of the Knights of the Round Table made a decision. My decision stands. As he watched his angry uncle rushing towards him, Tristan felt torn between two conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was gratitude for the kindness and the familial bond that his uncle had bestowed upon him. On the other hand, there was a sense of national duty, loyalty, and the path of righteousness. This was the unity and friendship among his fellow Knights of the Round Table. With determination, Tristan raised the bow in his hand. I will carry out the execution myself. The arrow shot straight toward King Mark. Tristan's arrow enveloped Mark's throat, eyes, heart, and kidneys, all vital points. In an instant, the once roaring and charging King Mark stood frozen in his tracks, immobilized. He could only stare intently at Tristan. Is this how you want to kill me, Tristan? Mark managed to utter with his last bit of strength, his voice filled with anger. This is my final mercy for you, my uncle. Tristan replied, his voice trembling, unable to conceal the pain of killing his loved one. His emotions remained far from calm. You are a great knight and a hero, Sir Tristan. Artorius said sincerely as he walked up to Tristan, placing his hand on his shoulder. I am a sinner. Tristan said sadly. Then let me share this sin with you. Artorius said, his tone compassionate. Your Majesty. Upon hearing this, Tristan could no longer hold back and fell to his knees, tears streaming down like a spring. You understand human hearts so well. I am willing to follow you forever. There's no more room for hesitation. These words were spoken by Lamorak, one of the Knights of the Round Table and one of the most skilled in archery. Since his father, King Pellinor, passed away, Lamorak inherited the throne. Despite being a king himself, he became a knight and remained loyal to King Arthur. This loyalty persisted even after Artorius ascended to the throne. Similar situations existed among the other Knights of the Round Table. They were not only knights but also kings of small nations, occupying more than half of Britain's territories. During the previous gathering of the Knights of the Round Table, Artorius had convinced all of them to support him and obey his commands. This provided the foundation for him to centralize power. I've had enough of the conflicts between nations, the self-interest of the privileged, and the internal strife of Britain. Lamorak said, kneeling on one knee while bowing to Artorius. From this day forth, I relinquish my throne, surrendering all my lands and subjects to His Majesty King Artorius Pendragon. I will serve at his side as a knight, fighting for my lord. As his words fell, the other kings of the Round Table also knelt before Artorius and pledged. We willingly surrender all our lands and subjects to His Majesty, King Artorius Pendragon. We will serve at his side as knights, fighting for our lord. Witnessing this scene, the other kings felt various emotions: fear, trepidation, or resignation. The wisest among them had already realized that in terms of military strength, public support, and morale, Artorius Pendragon possessed everything. They were powerless to change the course of events. And so, from the day General Stilicho announced the withdrawal from the province of Britannia in the year 408, until August 21, 486, after a span of 78 years, Britain finally put an end to the chaos of kings and competing nations, and once again united under one rule. Chapter 89, Awakening Origin. The kings in Britain, whether willingly or under coercion, swore allegiance to Artorius and were confined to Camelot until Artorius's decree reached all of Britain. When the dust settled, and all the territories were taken over by officials from Camelot or the Germanic military region, knights, commoners, nobles, and local leaders, all swore their loyalty to Artorius Pendragon, the Dragon King of Britain. The former kings boarded the dragon-headed ships bound for the Germanic military region, where they would start anew. For over 70 years, spanning 2 or even 3 generations, the dream of ruling a divided land seemed like a fleeting illusion. In the face of Artorius's unparalleled power, it was easily shattered like soap bubbles. Thus, Britain welcomed a new era. Marriage alliances with the Anglo-Saxons were expedited. Knights, officials, and military officers under Artorius, as well as nobles and local leaders, set an example by marrying brides from the Germanic tribes. In addition to natural unions, a significant number of female slaves were assigned to young and energetic common soldiers, aiming to produce a new generation of Germanic peoples. In Artorius's writings, as well as in written reports from various government levels in official language, a deliberate and sometimes subtle effort existed to downplay the concept of Britain-Celts and, instead, emphasize the Germanic concept. Simultaneously, a flag resembling the Roman, but not the Roman golden eagle, rather the black eagle, quietly replaced the red dragon flag, becoming the symbol of Britain's new era. Citizens of all nations, whether Celts or Germanic peoples, were encouraged to migrate to the Germanic regions and cultivate the land there. The troops and knights of various nations were gathered, organized, trained, and integrated into new legions, ready to be transported to the Germanic regions for this year's decisive battle. Autumn is approaching quickly. During a meeting of the Knights of the Round Table, Artorius said, "The season of harvest is also the season of activity for the Germanic peoples." Artoria, standing beside Artorius, curiously asked, "Are we going to engage in a decisive battle with the Germanic peoples this autumn? Will they launch an attack?" "You should ask, in which year did the Germanic peoples not launch an attack?" Artorius calmly replied. "They are like wolves, restless and insatiable whenever they smell food. Especially after the increase in food production in the Germanic territories." Morgan chimed in cheerfully on Artorius's other side. "Well, then we have no problem." Artoria nodded. "Let's put an end to all of this." "Yet." Artorius agreed. He glanced around, looking at the Knights of the Round Table. Since their joining, the final weakness of Artorius's army had been resolved. The most splendid and powerful knight organization of this era was now under his control. They possessed the noble phantasms rank items: magic swords, magic spears, magic armors, and magic bows, all crafted by Artorius's third magic. They rode magnificent horses adorned with the same noble phantasm rank horse armor bestowed upon them by Artorius. They formed the strongest and most fearsome legion of this era, crushing all of his enemies. Rest for a day. After the meeting, Artorius waved his hand and ordered the knights, "Tomorrow, we leave Camelot and return to the Germanic regions." "Yes, Your Majesty." Including Artoria, the expanded 200 Knights of the Round Table saluted Artorius in response. After accumulation, maturation, and sublimation, the former son of Dragon was about to unleash a world-shattering roar. And then, that evening. Awakening origin. In Artorius's room, Morgan, who had been summoned, had a peculiar expression on her face. After summoning the courage to forget the previous humiliation and respond to Artorius's call, she was shocked to find out that he had called her here just to talk about awakening origin. "What the hell? You've already mastered the third magic, and yet you're here talking to me about awakening origin." "Because I don't have a magic teacher," Artorius said. "I started by researching on my own with knowledge from Merlin, and then teacher Scathatch helped me improve my foundation. Only after that did she start teaching me rune. So, I haven't tested my origin yet." "That's true, but I have a premonition," Artorius said, interrupting Morgan. "And it's getting stronger. Awakening origin before my battle with Clovis will be advantageous for me." Hearing Artorius say this, Morgan scoffed, "You promised me before that if I did well, you would give me Britain. But what happened? You became the king of Britain and took all the benefits for yourself. Do you think I'm easily fooled?" She was right. Artorius did promise her that if she performed well after joining his ranks, she would be made the Queen of Britain. She had produced a large number of potions, contributed significantly to magecraft and formulas, mechanical blueprints, and the enhancement of enchanted weapons for the 3 legions in Britain. Apart from Morgan, Artorius had other court mages as well: druids who worshipped Celtic gods, shamans who worshipped Germanic gods, and priests and witches with a foundation in Greco-Roman magecraft. However, none of them could compare to Morgan. Through her actions, she dispelled any doubts others had about her, proving to them what it meant to be a top-notch witch. Even those most wary of Morgan had to acknowledge her abilities and contributions, and they cautiously discussed who would have thought that if this woman kept her mouth shut and worked seriously, she would actually be a rare good woman. "Humph, what do you mean actually? I, in the first place, am an unparalleled good woman." Hearing their private conversations by chance, Morgan coldly sneered in her heart, wishing she could strangle them with their own intestines. "But, for Artorius's sake, I'll let you have a way out, humph." Under Artorius's command, she had been obedient and diligent. Yet, she still felt exploited by him, who ignored his promise to make her the Queen of Britain. It's no wonder she was unhappy. However, the next moment, Artorius reached out and pulled her into his embrace. Morgan, being treated this way, felt her heart skip a beat. She was flustered, and then her body went limp. "I thought Artorius whispered in her ear, I had already given you enough. Upon hearing his words and implications, Morgan's breathing became heavy, and her gaze toward Artorius became fiery. Not enough. She replied dazedly, it's never enough. She answered Artorius in this manner and immediately kissed him, like a person who hadn't eaten in days and was faced with a delicious feast, multiplied by 10-fold or 100-fold of impatience. So. After the kiss ended, when Morgan wanted to take things further, Artorius stopped her and asked, so, what now? I understand. I'll do it. Morgan shouted angrily at Artorius, dissatisfied with her own weakness and Artorius's indifference. She circled around Artorius and, from behind, wrapped her arms around his neck, her fingertips touching the buttons of his cloak. Amidst a rustling sound, the king's cloak fell to the ground. A frosty magic circle appeared at his feet. Just let me take a look. Morgan's eyes gleamed with greedy desire. What is your origin? She delighted in the anticipation. It must be something that matches me perfectly. Something incredibly wicked, something immensely dark. Hee hee, hee hee hee. Is it death? Is it darkness itself? Is it evil, carnage, conquest, or something else? The previous frustration had completely vanished, leaving only the pleasure of discovering Artorius's secret. Morgan, the world's greatest witch, explored his soul with excitement, expecting to further perfect him and leave her own mark on him. So, with eager anticipation, Morgan's telepathic gaze turned towards the pure white gate within his consciousness, at the end of time and beyond. She approached it carefully, seeking, exploring, and trying until finally, she would seize the love and happiness that should rightfully belong to her. Hee hee hee, ha ha ha. Meanwhile, as Morgan flashed a malicious smile, Artorius's eyes lost their focus. His mind seemed immersed elsewhere. My elemental affinity is water, and the specialty of my mage craft is enhancement and sublimation. So, my origin should be. In the next second, just as Morgan regarded the present Artorius as her possession, ready to indulge herself, Artorius awakened. The roles of attacker and defender switched. In Artorius's eyes, the blazing frost seemed to encase the malevolent witch, seal her off, scorch her, and melt her away. After the cry of astonishment, Morgan realized the situation and smiled contentedly. Her efforts had not been in vain. The awakening of his origin was successful. Phew, so, that's how it is. That's your origin, very good, excellent. Pain and destruction arrived simultaneously in the next moment. The majesty of a ruler and the punishment of thunder plunged upon the witch as she was ejected from his consciousness. I must thank you. Artorius said to her. In my own way. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Before the witch's throat could let out any word, it was choked with laughter, for Artorius's origin truly matched the witch, as well as kings, emperors, and great leaders. Dual origins, they were domination and revolution. Domination meaning arrange, rule, control, and guide. Revolution meaning the elimination of the old, decayed, outdated, and contrary to the will of the people. Creating new things that are enticing, timely, and in line with the people's desires. The limits and scope of this origin encompass systems, theories, nations, and all things under the heavens. When Artorius perfectly adapted to his origin, all things under the heavens fell under the ambition of the Dragon King. This origin is truly what I need. You did well, Morgan Le Fay. Saying these words, Artorius pressed her down onto the bed. I cannot give you Britain, I broke my promise. But trust me. He gazed into Morgan's eyes. I can give you something better, something you'll like even more. I promise you'll be satisfied. Phhhh. Before Morgan could shout in excitement, exhilaration, and fear, her lips were ruthlessly sealed shut. Her emotionally charged screams turned into feeble buzzing. Chapter 90, My Dagger, Agravain. The dragon-headed ship sliced through the waves in the North Sea. Surveying the surroundings, hundreds of ships advanced in unison. The massive fleet carried tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians, along with a substantial amount of supplies, from the port of Londinium to Rotterdam. This was not the only fleet in recent times, but it was definitely the largest one. Ever since Artorius's Germanic military region joined forces with Britain and Roman-controlled Gallic, the coalition forces had engaged in numerous naval battles for control of the North Sea against the Germanic tribes. Each battle resulted in victory for the coalition. Artorius, who possessed reality marble, was invincible in naval warfare. After several large-scale naval battles, the Germanic tribes' maritime power crumbled, and the coalition forces gained control of the sea. The North Sea became a smooth passage, serving as Artorius's rapid transport line for troops and supplies. This is the final batch. Artorius thought to himself, standing at the bow of the ship, gazing at the sea. Within the span of nearly a month, Artorius had relocated Britain's army, noble knights, and a significant number of impoverished civilians from Britain to the Germanic military region. This greatly strengthened Artorius's power but also depleted his resources, leading Agravain, who remained in the Germanic military region, to constantly complain to him. Artorius always comforted Agravain in response to his grievances, saying, "Just endure a little longer. It will soon be over." It was not merely empty words. Because as long as he could defeat Clovis and usurp the fate of the Franks, all the elements that constituted an empire would be in place. Nothing would be able to stop him from sweeping across Europe. Upon receiving such instructions from Artorius, Agravain fell silent, continuing to exert his strength and work tirelessly. Artorius owed Agravain a debt of gratitude. During the early days of the Germanic military region, when Artorius was still a prince, he defied popular opinion and appointed Agravain as a governing officer in the region. This left Agravain perplexed, so he approached Artorius privately and said, "Your Highness, there are others under your command who possess superior administrative abilities than I do. Moreover, my reputation is far from favorable." Agravain had a bad reputation, both in Britain and in the Germanic lands. Many regarded him as a villainous character. His appearance was unimpressive, giving off a sense of darkness, much like a certain character named Hikigaya Hachiman, who was inherently scorned by others. So when Artorius promoted him, it was indeed an act of defying popular opinion. "What is the king's impression of you, Sir Agravain?" Artorius did not answer him directly, instead, he asked this question. Agravain didn't know how to respond, but fortunately, Artorius didn't require an answer. "The king has great trust in you, Sir Agravain," Artorius said. "He believes in your loyalty and that your actions are done for the king's sake." "That's precisely why I am loyal to the king," Agravain replied calmly. "But, Sir Agravain," Artorius continued, "does the king understand you?" Agravain hesitated and looked at Artorius with surprise, feeling somewhat fearful and unsure. "The king is a noble and pure existence, an ideal and virtuous ruler. So, can the king understand your actions?" After a moment of silence, Agravain clenched his fist and replied, "The king, he has forgiven me. He forgave my mistakes." "Mistakes?" Artorius tilted his head, his smile tinged with irony. "Sir Agravain, what have you done wrong?" Artorius stood up and slowly circled around Agravain. "Was it assassinating nobles who opposed him without the king's permission? Was it poisoning enemies without honor to facilitate our military operations? Inciting rebellion? Buying off dissenters? Bribing officials? Is that what you are referring to?" In the face of inquiry, Agravain's emotions reached their boiling point. Just before he could let out a shout, Artorius laughed and exclaimed loudly, "Ha ha ha, that is not a crime at all. It is a just act carried out for the sake of the kingdom's interests." Agravain. He looked at Artorius in astonishment, so surprised that he couldn't find words to say. It was the first time he had encountered someone who approved of his actions. Not forgiveness, but understanding. What's wrong with assassinating opponents? Scheming pests deserve to be eradicated. What's wrong with poisoning enemies? In war, one must go to any lengths to ensure victory. Inciting rebellion, bribing opponents, buying off foreign officials, what's wrong with all of that if it's for the sake of our country's interests? At this point, Artorius stopped in his tracks and placed both hands on Agravain's shoulders. "My father trusts you greatly, but he cannot understand your actions. I, on the other hand, can understand. Yes, I understand you. Your actions stem from a strong and fervent love for our nation. Sir Lancelot, Sir Gawain, and the other knights are undoubtedly honorable and glorious, unmatched on the battlefield. But in my eyes, powerful knights are easy to come by, while individuals like you, are rare talents. Your Highness, do you, truly think so?" Agravain looked at Artorius in disbelief, as if unable to fathom that such a noble prince would hold him in such high regard. "Yes, of course," Artorius said matter-of-factly, "a kingdom needs both its reputation and substance. The former is like a long sword, while the latter is like a dagger. It's just a matter of different roles, without superiority or inferiority. It's easy for a shining sword to bask in the sunlight and receive praise. But a hidden dagger, unknown to the world and despised by society, is hard to find. Thank you for your praise, Your Highness. After a moment of silence, Agravain suppressed his excitement and said to Artorius, however, I must clarify, Your Highness, that your praise of me is exaggerated. I am not as great as you think. The people who walk in the darkness, whom you need, are actually. What I need is not those who would yield to any means for profit, money, or anything else. Artorius interrupted him without hesitation, such individuals are not worthy of trust, let alone significant responsibilities. They may superficially resemble you, but their nature is completely different. Artorius gripped Agravain's shoulders tightly, causing him to flinch in pain. What I need is someone like you. I don't care about your outward appearance, I care about your inner self, a heart as precious as gold. You are loyal, brave, selfless, and fearless. Only someone like you deserves trust and important responsibilities. In my eyes, your worth surpasses that of Sir Lancelot. While saying this, Artorius locked eyes with Agravain to convey his sincerity. I'm not lying or speaking casually. And as for why I'm saying all this, it's because I need you, Sir Agravain. The empire I want to establish will far surpass that of my father. The radiance and heat I want to unleash will be 1,000 times, 10,000 times greater. For shining light, there must be deep darkness. And you, are the one I have chosen to walk among the people of darkness, the most trustworthy dagger. After that passionate talk, Agravain solemnly swore his allegiance to Artorius. He entrusted Agravain with the task of establishing the military intelligence system. They formed a relationship that surpassed even that of King Arthur. Just as Artorius had said, King Arthur could trust Agravain but could not understand him. However, Artorius Pendragon was different. He trusted Agravain and understood him. He understood the meaning behind Agravain's actions and understood the sacrifices and contributions he made. Once he understood this, Agravain made a firm determination to dedicate his remaining life to Artorius. Even if it meant working tirelessly. One person simultaneously serves as a government official, a military judge, and an intelligence officer? So what? A true warrior is willing to die for his trusted comrades. To work tirelessly for Artorius, even if his hair receded and his body became greasy, it was all insignificant. Yes, insignificant. With His Highness's talent in networking, bringing together the Knights of the Round Table and Britain's forces under his command is a great achievement. So, if it means being a little busier, then so be it. With such a mindset, Agravain spent another fulfilling day. From dawn to morning, and then to noon, the Iron Knight managed to complete all his tasks before he staggered back to his room. In the governmental office in Mainz, a dedicated room was provided for the government officials to rest. There, he could hold a pillow and sleep well, rejuvenating himself for better service to Artorius. It was only when he was on the road that he overheard a conversation between two subordinates. Hey, can you believe it? The former king actually abdicated and now serves the new king as his knight. It's truly astonishing. Humph, it's only natural. The former king was a reasonable person. Since the new king surpasses him in ability, it's only right to pass the throne. Upon hearing this conversation, the Iron Knight pondered in his mind. Then, another one spoke. And there's more to it. Do you know about that witch, Morgan Le Fay? Yeah, I know. The wicked and evil one. What about her? Well, she's also serving the new king now. What? Upon hearing this news, Agravain lost control. Chapter 91, Anger and Disbelief. Then, another one spoke. And there's more to it. Do you know about that witch, Morgan Le Fay? Yeah, I know. The wicked and evil one. What about her? Well, she's also serving the new king now. What? Upon hearing this news, Agravain lost control. Morgan managed to get close to His Majesty. What is she up to? What does she want? Is she planning something against His Majesty? With such thoughts in mind, Agravain, who was in a state of frenzy, headed towards Rotterdam at the fastest speed possible. On the second morning after Artorius and his group landed at Rotterdam harbour, Agravain arrived at the camp in the port area. In the faint morning mist, Agravain passed the sentry's inspection and entered the camp. His attention was quickly drawn to a conversation taking place nearby. Have you heard? Princess Morgan fell ill. In the camp, familiar knights and soldiers were whispering to each other. "Yeah, I heard she's bedridden due to exhaustion. It must be because she has been working too hard lately. After all, she has been doing so many things. Yeah, like making magic potions, crafting mechanical equipment, designing new war chariots and carriages, and enchanting weapons. She's a diligent one. So, she exhausted herself. Yep, she's a good person after all." In the next second, Agravain appeared before them. His face was gloomy. From their conversation, Agravain couldn't discern any resistance or discontent from them, indicating that Morgan's influence on the army was deeper than he had imagined. "Good day, Sir Agravain. Don't whisper while on duty." "Why yes." The sentries, who had just been whispering, were terrified by the sight of the Iron Knight's somber expression. They straightened their postures and looked as if they were about to salute. As a high-ranking official in the Germanic military region, Agravain was not only an administrative officer but also the leader of the secret agents. In addition, he served as a military judge. He had a perpetually gloomy face as if he were contemplating whom to kill. From top to bottom, no one in the entire region was not afraid of him. "Don't let your guard down, even on your own territory." With this final reminder to the sentries, Agravain left. "We're safe, hey." "Yeah, you're right. Hey, Sir Agravain doesn't look too good. Did something happen?" "Have you ever seen Sir Agravain look good?" "Well, I guess not." Meanwhile, Agravain clenched his fists tightly upon hearing the hushed whispers of the sentries behind him, tightly, very tightly. Bloody bastard! He wasn't angry at those two soldiers, they weren't worth it. Someone else had truly made him angry. Morgan Le Fay, a good person. What a joke! As one of Morgan's children and her former right-hand man, Agravain knew how deep the darkness within that woman was. She must be plotting something. Her existence undoubtedly threatens our great cause. Why did His Majesty recruit her? What could be the reason? I must persuade His Majesty to expel her. No, it should be to kill her. With thoughts already forming the Morgan Le Fay murder incident in his mind, Agravain was now very close to Artorius's tent. For the sake of His Majesty, even if it means shouldering the burden of killing my own mother, I am willing to do anything. With such determination, he stood in front of Artorius's tent. He awaited the announcement and then entered. Although Artorius had long given him the freedom to come and go, Agravain had never used the privilege. This was both a representation of the reserved nature of someone who walked in darkness and a response to Artorius's trust. And then, he froze. He was completely stunned. The loyal Iron Knight, with the resolve to assassinate Morgan, was watching helplessly as she obediently and meekly lay in the embrace of his king, just like a certain lion in an anime, nestled in the arms of a golden-haired character. "Well, well, Sir Agravain." Artorius greeted Agravain cheerfully, while gently stroking Morgan's hair. He waved his hand and asked, "What brings you here in such a hurry? Do you have good news for me?" Agravain hesitated, then stuttered, that." The Iron Knight's mind was in chaos, causing his words to become incoherent. But it wasn't entirely his fault. The image of Morgan, the insane, dark, chaotic witch, behaving as obedient as a court maid, was beyond belief. Especially for someone like the Iron Knight, who believed he understood Morgan Le Fay better than anyone and considered her a monster, it was utterly unthinkable. From his perspective, it was as if his king was holding onto a 7-headed, 10-crowned giant, troll, demon, or something similar chaotic, confusing, and incomprehensible. Morgan emitted poisonous gas from her mouth, her eyes burned with toxic flames, and her body was composed of various tentacles and chaotic malice. She was like a pillar of demons. How could anyone see her as a woman? Oh, right. Agravain quickly made a judgment. His Majesty is being controlled by magecraft. And just like that, as if he could read minds, Artorius reacted faster than Agravain. "I am not being controlled by magecraft, Sir Agravain. Please calm down and put your sword away." Seeing Agravain's eyes turning red, ready to fight Morgan to death, Artorius quickly interjected. This statement surprised Agravain even more, leaving him bewildered. "But, Your Majesty, Morgan is an exceptionally talented woman, you know. As long as you understand how to handle her, she can be the most outstanding ally." While Agravain struggled to find his words, Artorius smiled and said, "As I said, she can be controlled. It's like taming a wild beast. As he mentioned the taming part, Morgan chuckled and playfully nudged Artorius, causing Agravain's body to tremble and his pupils to constrict, afraid that she might tear Artorius apart. I've said it before, Sir Agravain. Embrace diversity, for greatness lies in acceptance. As Artorius spoke, he gently patted Morgan's little hand. She let out a soft snort and then stood up and walked to his behind and just stood there. What's wrong about Lady Morgan? Though she has made some mistakes in the past, as long as she repents, we can forgive her, right? Artorius continued his speech. Has she truly repented? Agravain asked carefully. Of course not. Artorius replied without hesitation. But I don't care about that. What matters to me is Lady Morgan's cooperation and the power she brings us. Do you understand, Sir Agravain? Agravain remained silent, though he wanted to respond with no, not at all. He decided to choose silence in the end. Morgan was staring at him with a threatening gaze as if saying, if you don't wise up, I'll destroy you personally. Agravain wasn't afraid of death, but he liked to keep his usefulness and continue serving his king. Well, Sir Agravain, it's fine if you don't have anything important. Artorius said, relieving the awkwardness of their initial conversation. Tell me what has been happening in the war zone while I was away. Agravain remained silent, not answering Artorius's question. Even without a hint from his eyes, Artorius understood his meaning. If we are on the same side, we should trust each other, without worrying about Lady Morgan. Yes, Your Majesty. Agravain replied, expressionless as always, but Artorius sensed his reluctance. Regarding internal affairs, I have resolved the incidents and documented them for you to review at any time. Agravain stated, presenting a record book. It contained accounts of everything related to the Germanic peoples, the Romans, and any other opponents who worked against them in secret. Resisting the military jurisdiction, refusing to pay taxes, plotting rebellions, colluding with external enemies like Clovis, and the Roman Emperor Lucius, conspiracies, betrayals, chaos, darkness. Everything was recorded in that thin book and marked as resolved with a check mark. Each cold statement represented merciless killings and suppressions or cunning and dark conspiracies. Capturing spies, taming them, turning them into double agents for their own side. Selecting and enticing traitors and informants from within the resistance group, then eliminating them all at once. Using benefits to win over and bind the local power players, threatening them with fear and torture, and seizing their weaknesses to make them submit. All of this had been Agravain's work over the past 2 years. By any means necessary. Orderly and organized. Cruel and insane. Like the art of darkness, a precious masterpiece of terror. Excellent as always. Artorius commented as he checked each item, confirming that Agravain had completed all the planned actions. Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. Agravain responded, unable to hide a smile when faced with Artorius's sincere compliments. Behind Artorius, Morgan watched the scene with great interest. Agravain was like a well-praised hunting dog, fully domesticated into the shape desired by Artorius, both inside and out. I chose the right man, Fufu. Morgan thought, feeling pleased. The frustration caused by the loss of her former tools, or rather, children, had completely vanished. Now, what about external affairs? Artorius calmly asked. How are our intelligence operations progressing regarding the Romans and the Germanic peoples, Sir Agravain? That is precisely what I am here to report to you. Agravain glanced at Morgan once again, then bowed after Artorius gestured for him to continue. Yes, Your Majesty. Agravain took out another record book. The senators in the Roman Senate can be stabilized through bribery. He said calmly. The same applies to the bribed officers and generals. Selling military intelligence, distribution maps of the military districts, even trading military supplies and provisions. Their military infiltration into the declining Western Roman Empire had been quite successful. Agravain reported these details in a relaxed tone. At present, 3 Roman generals and 4 governors can be swayed to our side. Once we engage in war with Rome and gain the upper hand, they will immediately defect, creating an opportunity for us. Well done, Sir Agravain, very well done. Upon hearing this, Artorius praised Agravain once again before he could even downplay his achievements. However, before Agravain could respond humbly, Artorius raised a question. But I have a small question. Please, Your Majesty. The ones we're about to deal with are the Franks. We're preparing for a massive battle against the Franks, maybe even starting immediately, right away, or tomorrow. In this situation, any intelligence advantage we gain over the Romans means nothing because if we lose, we won't be able to hold on to anything we have. Chapter 92, Fate and Miracle. Upon hearing this, Artorius praised Agravain once again before he could even downplay his achievements. However, before Agravain could respond humbly, Artorius raised a question. But I have a small question. Please, Your Majesty. The ones we're about to deal with are the Franks. We're preparing for a massive battle against the Franks, maybe even starting immediately, right away, or tomorrow. In this situation, any intelligence advantage we gain over the Romans means nothing because if we lose, we won't be able to hold on to anything we have. This is exactly what I need to report, said Agravain, unfazed by Artorius's displeasure. Facing Artorius's displeasure, Agravain maintained a composed expression and replied, As Your Majesty had mentioned, I have allocated 70% of our total strength to the Germanic peoples under Clovis's banner. Despite this, our gains have been minimal. Agravain's expression grew heavy as he continued, Our espionage operations against the Franks have been quite challenging. Artorius furrowed his brow and remarked, The Franks are of a low level of civilization, and their organizational structure is rather primitive. It should be relatively easy to conduct espionage among them. Indeed, as Your Majesty stated, but... Agravain paused for a moment, then continued, Whenever we engage in operations against the Franks, there are always some common mistakes. No matter how cautious and meticulous we are, no matter how well planned our strategies are, there are always unexpected occurrences. I understand. Artorius pondered for a moment before addressing Agravain, Rest assured, it is not your fault. On the contrary, your intuition is correct. At this point, Artorius revealed a pleased smile, saying, Sir Agravain, we are indeed contending with fate. Fate has chosen the Franks. Do you understand what that means? Agravain, although not fully grasping Artorius's meaning, responded without hesitation, Yes, Your Majesty. Artorius then ordered, Do not worry and do not hesitate. The day of the decisive battle approaches. It will be the battle against the Franks and the battle against fate. Until then, we must be fully prepared. Yes, Your Majesty. Continue with your duties, Sir Agravain. Set aside matters concerning Rome for now and devote all our resources to the undercover battlefield against the Franks. Ensure that we secure every possible advantage, no matter how small. As you will, Your Majesty. After receiving Artorius's response, the loyal Iron Knight bowed once again, casting a final glance at Morgan by Artorius's side. He hesitated to speak further but eventually retreated from the tent, leaving only Artorius and Morgan inside. You have trained him well, Artorius, the witch whispered from behind Artorius, wrapping her arms around his neck. I never expected Agravain to be so obedient to anyone's commands. Not even my foolish sister, Fufa, she chuckled. It was her failure to properly utilize him. Artorius replied calmly, As for you, have you not always employed him correctly, doing your dirty work? Yes, but I never invested any emotions in him. Morgan continued. I believed Agravain to be just a tool under my command. Indeed, but I consider Agravain a friend. I trust and respect him, and I invest my emotions in him. In return, he repays me with loyalty and devotion. That's the difference between us. Having said that, Artorius waved his hand, signaling Morgan to cease her comments. Enough about that. I initially thought the counter-force's manipulation of the situation was within certain limits, but I never expected it to act this way. By certain limits, Artorius was referring to heroic spirits, Chaldea, or any other organization related to the preservation of humanity. In the original work, there existed true anomalies that had successfully altered fate, the Lost Belts. The counter-force's methods were mostly as he described, helping out behind the scenes but mainly focusing on fixing things afterward. Artorius had never heard of the counter-force directly intervening beforehand to support the correct side. In Singularity F, it didn't enhance the prowess of Archer Emiya. In the first Singularity, it didn't strengthen the French alliance, well, perhaps it did to some extent. And not to mention that Emperor of Roses, could she actually be a daughter of the counter-force? Artorius, who had already shown considerable face to the counter-force, wanted to sneak his way through and maintain the correctness of the proper human history by usurping fate. However, he was still targeted by the counter-force. What the hell? It acted coy when faced with the demon gods, yet when facing him, it resorts to heavy blows. Sooner or later, just wait. Artorius silently swore, reluctantly accepting this fate. So, what do we do next? Morgan, who was behind him, wrapped her body around Artorius more tightly and asked cheerfully. What else can we do? Artorius's smile was icy and thought, do you expect me to seek help from those comedy characters in the servant universe? Unless I've gone mad. The only person one can rely on is oneself. I won't fall before the grand ambition of saving humanity, no matter what opponents I face regardless of the counter-force's blessing. I'm not afraid. As Artorius's words fell, a terrifying magical energy descended, caused by the third magic that belonged to him. Using his origin as a medium, it mimicked the domain of Avalon. It expanded outward with Artorius at its core. Invisible domination spread rapidly throughout the entire Germanic military region within the shortest time, continuously extending toward Rome and the Black Forest. This power nullified the blessing of fate on the Franks. The conditions and circumstances of the people in the Germanic military region were once again balanced and on par with the Franks. This is simply, miracle. Morgan, who witnessed this scene, widened her eyes in astonishment. With the infinite magical energy provided by the third magic, utilizing his domination origin, and combining it with the usage similar to Avalon, the bounded field has been diffused throughout the entire Central European region. It temporarily counteracts the blessing of fate on the Franks. Miracles descended upon the body of the dragon fighting for the world. However, miracles also come at a cost. In the next second, Artorius's well-trained body slumped as if an invisible mountain pressed down on him. His eyeballs bulged out, a sweet taste filled his throat, and after a cough, blood flowed through his fingers and onto the ground. Artorius. Seeing this scene, Morgan's voice changed. She rushed to Artorius's side as if her life were on the line, preparing to cast a healing spell on him. Of course, she was quickly stopped by him. He held Morgan's hand tightly. I'm fine. After saying that, Artorius exerted force and slowly stood up. His joints creaked due to the heavy pressure, causing concern that he would shatter into pieces in the next moment. It's just a minor issue. It can't kill me. Also, what just happened to me, don't mention it to anyone. The voice of the Dragon King remained majestic, but his body trembled slightly. Seeing this scene, Morgan couldn't help but cover her mouth, trying hard not to scream. She nodded repeatedly in response to his command. Chapter 93, Before the War. People from Britain, Germanic tribes, Rome, and all over the world gather under my command. Half an hour later, after a small training session in the Rotterdam camp, Artorius faced the gathered enthusiastic warriors and spoke out with a resounding voice, motivating them. His voice remained loud, his complexion rosy, and his posture upright. He seemed as if nothing had happened. Even Morgan, who witnessed everything with her own eyes, didn't know how he managed to do it. She only knew that she was now captivated by this man, unable to free herself. It was as if she were just like her foolish sister, whom she had always despised. She was afraid that she would unquestionably give her life for this man. The moment of decisive battle is approaching. Artorius proclaimed. == The moment of decisive battle is approaching. At the same time, on the eastern bank of the Rhine River, deep within the fearsome Black Forest, in the central fortress of the tribal stronghold of the Franks, within the grand palace of the great Clovis, the barbarian king with disheveled golden hair and beard instinctively raised his head. The times are changing. My fate is about to descend upon me. His wolf-like emerald eyes shimmered with a cold light, and he quickly made a decision. == The winds have shifted. In the palace of the newly established Roman capital, Ravenna, Emperor Lucius also raised his head. Lately, the days had been particularly difficult for the Western Roman Emperor. Vast territories of the empire had been lost, the military forces were depleted, and they were on the brink of collapse. The Eastern Emperor, Zeno, showed no inclination to offer assistance and even anticipated his failure. To the south of Western Rome, the Vandals and Alans occupied the capital of the African province, Carthage, where they established their kingdom. In Spain, the Gothic kingdom launched a relentless offensive. In Dalmatia and Pannonia, the Ostrogoths also coveted Italy. The relationship between General Artorius and the Franks had become increasingly tense. A great war was about to begin. The age of the barbarians is about to start. Lucius murmured. == In Ctesiphon, the king of kings, Cavadi of the Sasanian Empire, looked towards the east with a worried gaze. The relentless cavalry of the Hephthalites had conquered the pleasure-seeking Kushan Empire and now turned their greedy eyes toward them. Under the assault of these newly risen nomadic warriors, their previous monarch had perished. The Gupta Empire on the Indian subcontinent also struggled to withstand the attacks of these steppe warriors, teetering on the brink of collapse. At the same time, unbeknownst to them, a new storm was gathering within the desert city-states along the Red Sea coast. O fate! On the southern bank of the great river, Emperor Xiaozi of the recently established Southern Qi Empire gazed towards the northern bank. The power of the Xianbei people was growing stronger day by day. They had conquered the former Yan, seized the Xia kingdom, subdued northern Liang, and inflicted a major defeat on the Ruran. The fertile lands of the northern frontier of the Central Plains lay within their grasp. The new emperor even began implementing Sinicization reforms, preparing for long-term control over China. Since the collapse of the former Qin and the death of Fujian, the balance of power between the north and south had once again shifted, with the north becoming stronger and the south weaker. This left those in the southern dynasties who hoped to conquer the Central Plains feeling hopeless. Throughout the late 5th century, it is easy to come to this conclusion. It was a savage century, an era of barbarian dominance. In the forests, on the grasslands, in the mountains, by the riverside. All the barbarians have become active. From east to west, from south to north. Persia, China, and Rome, as well as India. All the countries symbolizing civilization are their targets of attack. From a mystery perspective, in this age, where mystery is fading and the age of gods is on the verge of being replaced by the age of man. The gods and phantasmal species hide on the reverse side of the world, abandoning the planet's surface to the so-called new humans. These uncivilized humans soon suppressed the ancient humans who had built their civilization based on magic, true ether, and mystery. The powers that the ancient humans took pride in, which could easily annihilate any resistance with their formidable strength, the flying devices, magical cannons, power armors, giant soldiers built on the foundation of the Age of Gods. All the black technologies of the Age of Gods have turned into scrap metal and rubbish due to the decline of true ether. This trend seems irreversible and unchangeable. Except for the East taking a different path, both Rome and Persia, which were once known as the three great empires, vanished in the catastrophe. Of course, those distant nations are temporarily beyond the scope of this book. Let us focus on Europe. This region is known in later ages as the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Switzerland, Denmark, and Germany. It is here that the war, which will determine the fate of Europe, begins to brew. Every tribe that is loyal to Artorius or Clovis. Every town and village that is loyal to them. Whether Germanic peoples, Romans, or Celts. Whether knights, soldiers, or commoners. Whether excited, fanatical, voluntary, or forced, they will all be thrown into this war of madness. By the end of August, when the crops in the fields ripen, when bloody battles and plundering begin at the border between the Black Forest and the Germanic military region, Artorius and Clovis dispatched messengers to each other. They appeared to be brothers and very polite. But their true intentions were quite different. Clovis wanted Artorius to surrender and join him in attacking Rome. In return, he promised the position of chieftain as well as security and happiness for the people of Artorius. In turn, Artorius wanted Clovis to kneel and lick his boots, and it would be even better if he could offer tens of thousands of Germanic beauties as tribute, for the purpose of revitalizing the human race. At that time, he will grant upon him the title of Grand Chieftain of Wallachia, and everyone will be content. Of course, both Clovis and Artorius know that such friendly negotiations are nonsense. The real determination of the outcome depends on their own methods. By mid-September, all of Artorius's forces had been strategically deployed along the mouth of the Rhine River. This arrangement included 2 British legions, 2 Gallic legions, 1 Roman legion, and 4 Germanic legions. The expanded unit of Knights of the Round Table was named the Brotherhood Knights, and the Dragon Sentinel is now known as the Radiant Knights. His forces exceed 70,000, with over 2,000 elite knights and over 2,000 mages recruited from various places. Since the disintegration of the Western Roman Empire, it is the first time that such a large and elite Roman-style legion has appeared on the ruins of the empire. They are different from the late Western Roman period, where the army had completely succumbed to Germanic barbarism. They are adorned in the finest plate armor of this era, employing Macedonian-style long spear phalanxes but with greater mobility and flexibility in formation. They are equipped with Roman-style ballistae, not mounted on chariots for ease of mobility. The ballistae are also enchanted, achieving a combination of primitive science and magic. Artorius distributed mass-produced magic armor and weapons comparable to noble phantasms created using his third magic. They are called Frosteel armor, pure white sword, and icy blue lance, and are provided to his elite legions. As a result, these legions possess combat capabilities on par with an average servant while maintaining top-tier discipline and training. A series of inventions from science, combined with the glorious technology from the Age of Gods, form this last divine legion. In contrast, under Clovis's command, the number of Germanic coalition forces facing Artorius across the river has reached a staggering 300,000. This number is an estimation and can only be an estimation because it is truly impossible to count. When the two heroes of the Germanic region prepare for the decisive battle, when the mortals in the world become frenzied about the upcoming war, the harsh weather worsens the situation. Cold, large hailstones mixed with raindrops viciously fall from the leaden sky. Everyone in the rain feels a chill from their scalp to their bones. Men, women, children, anyone who can move rushes into the wheat fields. They use sickles, knives, axes, or even their bare hands to desperately harvest the ripe or nearly ripe wheat. They continue until they are frozen stiff by the icy rain and hail, or until the wheat fields are shattered by hailstones. On the eve of the decisive battle, on the eve of the autumn harvest being stored, the Germanic region suffers from a historically rare natural disaster. Hail, rainfall, and even blizzards often lead to reduced harvests or complete crop failures in many areas. Driven by hunger, the Germanic peoples emit desperate roars, converging like a torrent and joining Clovis's ranks. To storm Gaul. By storming Gaul, they can secure food and ensure their survival. It's as simple as that. With this belief, the number of Germanic coalition forces east of the Rhine River continues to increase. Realizing that the training and equipment of his troops are inferior to Artorius, Clovis has already decided to win this war through numbers. Chapter 94, War of Madness, I. The war between Artorius and the Franks began with boredom and tedium. From mid-September to early October, for over 20 days, the main forces of both sides faced each other across the Rhine River. There was no decisive battle between the main forces, only small-scale skirmishes along the river. Everywhere along the Rhine, Artorius commanded his flagship, the dragon-headed warships. These warships patrolled back and forth, controlling the waterway to ensure that the Germanic armies could not cross the Rhine. As for Artorius's own army, they lacked the numbers and therefore had no desire to launch a proactive attack. Clovis's army was approaching a formidable force of 400,000, while Artorius's army was only 1/5 or 1/6 of that size. In September, the Germanic alliance attempted to build a pontoon bridge and gather ships to cross the river. However, they were all thwarted by Artorius's superior naval forces. Artorius's Germanic army resorted to using fire ships to burn the pontoon bridge, mages and ballistae to bombard the enemy, and engaged in passionate exchanges with frost giants hurling giant stones. They left Clovis's alliance with no viable options. Clovis also sent envoys to seek cooperation with the tribes in the northern Scandinavian peninsula. The Jutes, Danes, and Harals tribes there were known for their naval capabilities. However, the distance could not quench their immediate thirst. Not to mention the fighting capabilities of these Germanic tribes, nor whether they were willing to join forces with the Franks. Even if everything went according to Clovis's wishes, there wouldn't be enough time. According to Agravain's intelligence, the Franks' supplies could only last until the end of November at most. The alliance fleet couldn't possibly provide support in time. Clovis was on the verge of defeat. Therefore, the officers under Artorius felt optimistic about the future of the war. Clovis's Germanic forces will be overwhelmed by their own sheer numbers. We don't even need to attack, they will collapse due to food shortages. As long as we continue to hold our ground, victory will be ours. Such statements were popular among Artorius's troops. It was plain to see. Artorius controlled the Rhine River. With his fleet, he could buy time until the Rhine froze over. Meanwhile, on the western bank of the Rhine, Morgan, Artorius's head court mage, oversaw the construction of a series of sturdy fortresses. This defensive line would enable his army to hold out for at least half a year. By then, Clovis's alliance would likely crumble due to a lack of food. To secure victory, Clovis would undoubtedly force his troops to launch a desperate attack on the fortified strongholds. Artorius's army simply needed to wait and rely on the strong fortress to achieve victory. It was the easiest choice. From the very beginning, Artorius stood in an unbeatable position. Of course, this was only a superficial observation. During a high-level military council, Artorius spoke frankly to his trusted generals, legion commanders, and the Knights of the Round Table. We cannot drag this out any longer, for 2 reasons. First, I myself cannot endure for that long. I am burdened greatly by my fight against fate using the third magic. I can only hold on until the end of October at most. By that time, fate will undoubtedly favor Clovis. Staying put would be nothing more than waiting for death. Artorius. Your Majesty. O King. As Artorius spoke, everyone looked at him with concern. Artorius was willing to sacrifice himself, and he had indeed made sacrifices. But he wouldn't sacrifice silently, unknown to others. He would use his sacrifice to inspire morale, as he was doing now. Upon hearing that Artorius, in order to save the world, was single-handedly defying fate and bearing its weight, the loyalty and fanaticism of the Knights of the Round Table reached unprecedented heights. For a moment, if any Knight of the Round Table dared to act out of line. For example, if Lancelot were to cause trouble by betting someone's wife, or if Tristan were to shout something like "The king doesn't understand people's hearts," the other knights would immediately rush forward and cut him down with their swords without hesitation. There would be no discord and division within the Knights of the Round Table, as was the case in the original timeline. As for the second point, Artorius continued with a serious expression on his face. On the other side of the Rhine River, there are over 300,000 people. According to Sir Agravain's estimation, only a fraction of them can be considered warriors, probably less than half. The majority are civilians like hunters, farmers, and craftsmen. They joined Clovis's army out of hunger and despair. Since our goal is to save humanity, I cannot simply ignore them. The radiance of our king is enough to pierce through any darkness. Oh my king, please give us your command. We are willing to march ahead for you. After Artorius spoke these words, the bright-hearted individuals felt moved. Even Agravain, who harbored darkness within, recognized the validity of Artorius's plan based on practical interests, and thought, with hundreds of thousands of people, it is precisely what we need. Let them survive and serve us. They can become soldiers, farmers, craftsmen, creating benefits for our soon-to-be empire. Truly a man worthy of my attention. Such profound aura, how enticing! Morgan said in her heart, accompanied by a reddening face. She looked at Artorius with fanatical eyes. Perhaps her emotions were different from the others, but the intensity of her passion was no less than anyone else, be it Artoria, the vice-commander of the Knights of the Round Table and commander of the 1st Legion, or Mordred, the vice-commander of the Radiant Knights and commander of the 2nd Legion. Women of Pendragon are never inferior to anyone. So, Your Majesty, are you suggesting? Amidst the fervor of the crowd, only Agravain felt concerned. He couldn't help but ask, and received a natural yet thrilling reply. Besides being a king, I am also a knight. He surveyed his surroundings before continuing. After making adequate preparations, I will take the initiative and launch a surprise attack, directly crushing Clovis by myself, ensuring minimal losses. But, brother! Upon hearing Artorius's words, Mordred exclaimed in frustration, "You are the king. Shouldn't we handle the charge and battle for you?" Mordred. Artorius looked at his anxious sister with a gentle yet firm tone, "Everything else can be entrusted, but this task requires me to personally act." Usurping fate, is it? Artorius spoke from the other side. Yes, it's usurping fate. Artorius nodded. I will personally defeat Clovis. It is a crucial step. Of course, there's no need for any of you to worry. I have a foolproof plan that will protect me under any circumstances. Upon hearing Artorius's reassurance, the trusted generals present felt somewhat relieved. Indeed, Artorius possessed the third magic, along with the absolute defensive treasure Avalon. He was the dragon vying for the throne, advancing towards imperial glory. In terms of spirit, equipment, and physical prowess, the new king of Britain was more than capable of surpassing his rivals. His defensive power and vitality were both at the X rank. That settles it. Artorius surveyed his surroundings once again. The day of victory is within our grasp. Let us strive forward together, my comrades. Chapter 95, War of Madness, 2. On that evening, in the Land of Shadows. This is completely different from what you said back then, Artorius. Facing her most promising disciple, Scathatch couldn't help but sigh. You used to say that as a leader, you should remain in the rear. But now, you decide to take the initiative to attack directly. Times change. Artorius didn't want to waste time on such matters. After a simple response, he got to the crucial point. How is the spell preparation coming along? It's in progress. Can it be faster? Artorius raised an eyebrow. It's already as fast as it can be. What if I lend a hand? It seems I haven't taught you well enough, Scathatch said. This spell requires precision, not just blindly infusing magical energy through the third magic to achieve miracles. No, I mean regarding my origin. Artorius spoke up. He was a rare individual who possessed dual origins. Among those in the Fate series who had their origins revealed, only Emi Yakuritsugu had dual origins severing and binding. The magecraft bullets he created using the concept of origins played a crucial role when facing the Clock Tower's Lord El Meloy, Kenneth Archibald. Severing and binding, compared to domination and revolution, weren't just a small difference conceptually. Emi Yakuritsugu, known as the Mage Killer, wasn't just slightly inferior to Artorius in terms of ability and strength. Therefore, the effects that Artorius's origin could achieve were naturally more terrifying and astonishing. Usurping fate, from a certain perspective, could also be understood as domination. Dominating fate. Dominating enemies. Dominating oneself. Thus, if Artorius cooperated with the spell preparation, merely infusing the effect of his origin into the spell would yield remarkable results. Yes, but you've enough on your plate. Scathatch naturally referred to the large-scale bounded field covering the entire Germanic region, resisting fate's influence. This massive bounded field that resisted fate utilized Artorius's domination origin. Your burden will only increase further, Artorius. Scathatch calmly stated to him. But I won't die. Artorius was brimming with confidence. Indeed, he possessed the third magic in Avalon. Even if he were crushed into tiny fragments, he could still revive. However, the pain involved in that. I can endure it. Hearing Artorius say that, Scathatch fell silent once again. She earnestly looked at her disciple and once more sighed in admiration. You've truly become a good man. So what? Artorius chuckled. Are you captivated with me, teacher? Don't get too full of yourself, kid. Scathatch extended a finger and hooked Artorius's chin. If you think you can flirt with me, it'll be a few hundred years too early. Ha 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 ha. Hearing her words, Artorius paused for a moment, then burst into a burst of genuine and joyful laughter. It made Scathatch couldn't help but sigh. It will be painful. Scathatch turned around and headed towards the magic workshop. Don't blame me for not warning you. As she said that, a beautiful silver-haired fairy happily rushed over. Artorius. It was Vivian. Are you here to see me? I'm so happy. Yes, yes, you're such a good girl. Just like consoling Mordred, Artorius gently gave a head pat to Vivian, which made her burst into silly giggles. Seems like your methods of dealing with women have upgraded. Watching this scene, Scathatch thought to herself. And then, in an instant, her mind wandered. Surprised, followed by silence. Because she sensed, when Vivian and Artorius were intimate, she felt a bit jealous. Time passed to the next day. Is everything all right, big brother? You look so exhausted. Mordred gazed at Artorius with a worried expression. Even after bathing in the holy spring, why do you still look like this? What did Teacher Scathatch and Vivian do to you? Mordred asked with concern. Today was a special day, and it was her turn to accompany Artorius. When she woke up in the morning, she saw her brother looking haggard, which made her unhappy. It's not important. Artorius replied. Usually, Artorius would take the time to comfort his adorable sister, but not now. Despite his physical fatigue from the burden he bore after the battle with Vivian, his spirits were unusually high and energetic. What matters is that we finally obtained the key to victory. The key to victory? Did you complete the spell to usurp fate? Mordred exclaimed in surprise. Wasn't it supposed to take 3 months? The longer we wait, the deeper the suffering of the people. Artorius said as he stood up, donning his frost silver armor and ice blue cape. After channeling some magical energy, the signs of fatigue and weakness disappeared. Once again, he became the fearsome Dragon King with boundless power and vitality. Spread the word. Artorius calmly declared. We will launch our attack tonight. Tonight? Mordred was astonished. Is there enough time for that? If we draw too many ships, won't the enemy catch on? No, we won't use ships. Then how will we cross the Rhine River? Mordred's question was answered later that night. At the banks of the Rhine River, Artorius raised clarent borrowed from Mordred, and an unimaginable coldness emanated from the sword. With a swift motion, he froze the entire surface of the river. Then, with another swing, the once smooth ice shattered into countless tiny fragments, resembling powdery snow that wouldn't cause any slipping. My knights! My comrades! My warriors! Artorius turned around and gave a speech to the 8,000 troops following him. Tonight, we will make history. Tonight, we will bring everlasting peace, prosperity, and tranquility to our nation. In response, there was no thunderous cheer as in the past. Instead, there was a unanimous hum. Sound. The knights and cavalrymen held branches in their mouths to remain silent while raising their swords and lances as a gesture of homage and response to their king. Artorius then gave the command, cross the river. Our target is the head of the barbarian king, Clovis. With the Dragon King's order, the cavalry formed their formation and galloped forward. The leather-wrapped horseshoes made a dull sound as they hit the ground. The accompanying mages waved their staves, creating illusions to shield the army and deal with the alarms and traps set by Clovis's mages. With enough caution and vigilance, Artorius's cavalry remained unnoticed by the careless guards until they were less than 50 meters away from the enemy camp. Ahem, what's that? In the next moment, the guard's terrified cry came to an abrupt end. An arrow shot by Tristan had entered his right eye and pierced through his head. Following this was Artorius's furious roar and the resounding response. Anyone who dares to obstruct our righteous cause shall be killed. Chapter 96, War of Madness, 3. A bonus chapter for every 1k power stones, thanks for the support. What is that? What's going on? Enemies. Enemies. Chaos, madness, and cruelty. The bloated army of the Germanic peoples resembled an aging African elephant. Despite their massive bodies, their movements were unusually sluggish, and their reaction speed was slower than ever. In the camp, dirtier and more disorderly than a slum, the Germanic peoples scattered like headless flies after the sudden attack. Considering the Germanic peoples' barbaric nature and way of life, almost every adult male was a qualified warrior. However, being a qualified warrior didn't make them qualified soldiers. They lacked training, didn't understand military orders, and had no organization. When Artorius's cavalry surged forward, many tribesmen panicked and fled, but there were also brave souls who raised their weapons to resist. However, against the elite, heavily armored and magecraft-empowered cavalry charge, the effectiveness of individual light infantry in countering the attack was close to zero. Swords and lances, horseshoes and crossbows. Artorius's forces possessed the most formidable cavalry in Europe. In the blink of an eye, they wrought endless slaughter as they charged into the enemy camp. But besides futile deaths, they achieved little else. Cold steel, blazing magic swords, monstrous war horses, and heroic warriors. Severe discipline, fervent beliefs, boundless magical energy, and equestrian tactics honed over a millennium. All of it combined to form the last divine legion, a terrifying force unmatched in combat. They swept all before them. Bodies, flesh, and debris. Do not linger in battle, charge and press forward. Oh! Artorius's furious roar resounded throughout the legion. The knights responded with thunderous enthusiasm, rolling forward like an unstoppable torrent. The cavalry crushed all opposition in their path, penetrating deep into the heart of the Frankish camp. Only then did Artorius encounter true resistance. After easily mowing down scattered groups of skirmishers, the cavalry faced a wall of shields. Countless Germanic warriors in black armor stood before Artorius. They held long spears and large shields, clad in wolf skins, with resolute expressions and cold gazes. Shoulder to shoulder, shields stacked upon shields, spears raised high, they formed a formidable defense line. The druids and priests wearing deer-horned helmets and wielding oak staffs, hailing from the north and the Slavic lands, frantically worked behind the shield wall. Sinister magecraft scattered from blood sacrifices and life force, empowering these elite Germanic warriors with magecraft barriers. This was Clovis's royal guard. An elite unit comprised of Germanic nobles' descendants. Their number surpassed 10,000. This shield wall tactic was one of the infantry tactics learned from the Romans by the Germanic peoples. From that time to hundreds of years later, infantry formations with large shields and long spears were always exceptional and powerful. They halted the Viking onslaught at Stamford Bridge. They resisted Arab and Egyptian cavalry during the Crusades and the Battle of Poitiers. For thousands of years to come, they remained the dominant infantry tactic, withstanding countless cavalry and steel. Until the rise of the long pike formations, which eventually replaced them. However, now, they couldn't stop Artorius' Pendragon. Use light beam. Among the cavalry group, commanded by Tristan in charge of the mounted archers, after a disappointing round of magic bowshots, Artorius issued the following command. Shortly after, led by Artoria wielding the Holy Lance Rongominiad and Mordred wielding Clarent, the knights rode forward. They were equipped with the pure white sword and icy blue lance mass-produced by the third magic. Blinding frosty light beams illuminated the night sky. Hundreds of light beams, targeting the enemy formation, fired simultaneously. The magecraft barriers of the Germanic druids and priests were easily shattered like eggshells. Thousands of elite Germanic warriors turned into ashes in an instant. At that moment, the world fell silent. Fate shifted. Artorius' Pendragon gained the upper hand. When the strongest shield of the Franks fell beneath the mightiest spear of Artorius, only one last batch of enemies remained, standing between the two rulers of this world. Artorius. Before a tent, Clovis, king of the Franks and also known as the Wolf King and King of Barbarians, roared thunderously with his wolf-like eyes. He had killed anyone who tried to persuade him to retreat, escape, or surrender. Without hesitation, he mounted his warhorse, raised two swords in his hands, and charged furiously toward Artorius' location. Even at this critical moment, even when the situation was at its most perilous, he refused to give up. His royal guards were losing, and tens of thousands of cannon fodder and miscellaneous troops were in disarray. The once flattering Germanic chieftains now had different intentions. It was not difficult to imagine that once he was defeated, even if not killed, those chieftains would switch sides immediately. They would kneel before the governor of the Germanic military region and then hunt him down with a fiercer, more insane attitude than now. I will never accept it. I will never accept it. Fate is on my side. I am the king of Europe. Clovis roared in madness while wielding two swords, Holy Sword Durandal and Golden Sword Joyeuse. These two famous swords, deeply connected to the legends of Charlemagne and the Franks, greatly enhanced Clovis's power. In the world of Type Moon, Nasu verse, Artorius had no way of knowing whether Clovis had possessed these two swords or if the counter-force was meddling with events. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that the Wolf King had led his troops and launched a charge against Artorius. The royal guards clad in black plate armor stood united around their king, clashing fiercely against the knights of the Round Table donning frost silver plate armor, who formed the vanguard of the cavalry group. The collision between the two forces was like pouring strong acid into boiling water, igniting the pinnacle of this battle in an instant. When their lances broke, they turned to swords, knives, or bows with enchanted arrows, slashing through the air and exchanging fierce blows. The once invincible knights of the Round Table suddenly found themselves embroiled in a bitter and intense struggle. The 800 Clovis's royal guards were indeed dwindling in numbers, facing the superior knights of the Round Table, they were at a disadvantage. But with the help of Germanic berserkers charging from both sides and other troops of the Franks, they managed to hold their ground against Artorius' fierce onslaught. Amidst the chaotic battle, Artorius wielded Giebalg and moved with his horse as if he were in an empty space, instantly slaying any enemies who appeared before him. However, being embroiled in the melee, he couldn't unleash his sword beam to kill from afar. Thus, even with his astonishing martial prowess, he couldn't change the course of the battle. Unless... Artorius! Where are you? You mongrel! Clovis continued to rage, his voice causing tree branches to shiver, and Artorius locked onto him immediately. Clovis, killing him will lead to victory. With that thought in mind, Artorius didn't hesitate and urged his horse forward. Artorius! At the same time, Clovis also locked eyes with him. Chapter 97, Dragon King vs Wolf King. Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Clovis laughed maniacally as he swung his two swords, cutting down the charging knights, both men and horses as if he were cutting vegetables. Prior to clashing with Artorius, the most significant opponent he had defeated was Gawain. Before Artorius' eyes, Gawain's sword was flicked away by his opponent, along with his right hand that gripped the sword, both soaring into the air. Without hesitation, Artorius threw his spear, Giebalg, toward Clovis. Clovis leaned to the side, evading Artorius' attack, and missed the opportunity to pursue Gawain. Step back! Although Gawain was not one to accept defeat, he obeyed Artorius' command and stepped back, clenching his teeth. Clovis had no interest in pursuing a minor character like Gawain. Just as Artorius now only had eyes for him, Clovis was focused solely on Artorius. He laughed maniacally and urged his warhorse forward. But as he approached Artorius, a strong sense of danger overwhelmed him, causing him to roll off the horse's back. Simultaneously, a beam of light grazed his cheek, obliterating one of his ears. Humph! Ha 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 ha! Failing to hit Clovis with the sword beam from Clarent, Artorius snorted. At the same time, amid Clovis's maniacal laughter, Artorius also leaped up from his mount. Amidst the horse's neighing, Clovis wielded the left-hand sword, Durandal, severing the forelimb of Artorius's horse. Simultaneously, with the right-hand sword, Joyeuse, Clovis blocked Artorius's enraged strike as he leaped. After returning Clarent back to Mordred and throwing Guy Balg, Artorius drew Excalibur. He fiercely thrust the holy sword toward Clovis's chest. Boom! The holy sword and the golden sword clashed violently, releasing terrifying magical energy that dispersed in all directions. In an instant, all those with insufficient strength were reduced to dust, leaving no trace of their remains. Witnessing this scene, the troops from both sides quickly retreated, leaving the battlefield to the two kings. Artoria and Mordred had the power to intervene, but seeing that Artorius had the upper hand and knowing the significance of this battle, they refrained from acting, only observing from the outskirts and staying prepared to provide support. In the center of the battlefield, though there were only two people, the spectacle they created resembled two giant beasts locked in combat. It was a war between the frost dragon, stirring cold winds, and the frenzied demon wolf. They stepped back, and back again until their fighting's aftershocks could no longer reach. Ha 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 ha! Ha 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 ha! After blocking Artorius's attack, Clovis continued to laugh maniacally, wielding the two famous swords recklessly, seemingly indifferent to defense, and relentlessly slashing at Artorius. Not bad strength. As a dragon, Artorius possessed incredible power, enough to move mountains, yet Clovis, a mere mortal, managed to withstand it. And the speed too. Similarly, as Clovis swung his two swords, Artorius employed his third technique, summoning a pure white sword in his left hand to counterattack swiftly. The sword's speed, surpassing the speed of sound multiple times, generated shockwaves capable of toppling ancient trees. Yet Clovis managed to keep up. But your techniques are too crude. In the next moment, Artorius cunningly baited Clovis with flaws, feints, and traps. The first strike disarmed Clovis, the second pierced his heart and lungs, and the final one went straight through his throat. Relying on the mass-produced weapon, pure white sword, Artorius channeled magical energy throughout his body and released it at full power, causing a near point-blank explosion that could almost overturn the entire camp. I've got you now. I win. As he executed his move, Artorius exclaimed in excitement, fate shall converge. The next moment, an intense pain struck his back. Artorius! Brother! No! My king! Amidst the shouts of his mother, sister, and subordinates, Artorius released his sword, clutching the blade of Joyeuse impaled through his own body with his hand. Under the astonished and disbelieving gaze of the figure behind him, the legendary golden sword was crushed by the frost dragon's grip. Did you really think this would defeat me? Did you think it could make me abandon my ambition? You counter-forces puppet! In one swift motion, Artorius grasped the throat of another Clovis behind him. Ignoring the excruciating pain and injuries, he effortlessly lifted him. No! This can't be possible! The expression of elation turned into terror, and the Wolf King stared at Artorius with eyes akin to those of someone witnessing a monster. I am supposed to. My Joyeuse is. My fate is. I will, cough, arg. At the same moment, another body of Clovis who got pierced through the throat and heart by Artorius earlier, collapsed to the ground and dissipated like scattered sand. Perhaps it was some kind of magecraft, or maybe a special skill. Beneath the rugged and robust appearance of the King of Franks, lay a sinister heart. Realizing that he was no match for Artorius, he made a decision to use a dirty trick to win. His previous laughter and bravery were just a facade. His true move came after he was killed by Artorius. Seizing the moment when Artorius was elated when killing his fake body, having eliminated a formidable foe and relaxing his guard, Clovis attempted an assassination. With all his might, he used Joyeuse, piercing Artorius's heart. The mighty magical energy of the sword guaranteed Artorius's demise. He was so close to success. The frost steel armor proved futile against Joyeuse's sharpness as it pierced the Dragon King's heart. Yet, despite this, the outcome remained a resounding failure. Artorius, who possessed the third magic and Avalon, had long transcended the realm of ordinary humans. Clovis's attack would be enough to slay a true dragon, but it proved futile against Artorius. To make matters worse, Artorius caught him, grabbing his throat, and leaving him unable to escape. The power capable of crushing divine steel couldn't crush Clovis's neck. And so, Artorius added his other hand. Artorius's expression was not one of pain or anger but of sheer ecstasy. He truly had fate by the throat. He tightened his hands, inward, making a creak sound, indicating that he was getting even closer to usurping fate. Throughout this process, Clovis struggled desperately. He managed to pull out a dagger tied to his calf and thrust it fiercely into Artorius's arm, but Artorius remained immovable. Clovis fought desperately to break free. He used his teeth, his head, his hands, his legs, his everything, but they proved futile. Sometimes pleading, sometimes giving Artorius a fierce stare. He seemed to be begging for mercy while also issuing harsh threats. T/N, this somewhat reminds me of that epic moment when Ins crushed Clementine in Overlord. Clovis wanted to make a comeback. As long as he broke free and fled as soon as possible, he was certain that he still had a chance, even if it meant suffering a terrible defeat and losing 400,000 warriors. As long as fate continued to favor him, he could rise again after some time. But no, all of those were just his wishful thinking. Clovis's army could only freeze in place and watch dumbfounded as their king struggled helplessly. Meanwhile, Artorius's army could only gaze in awe at their king's absolute strength. Fate shall also submit to me. I am the one who will conquer Europe, conquer the world, the greatest figure of this era, and the one who will establish a magnificent empire. Artorius declared loudly as he stared at Clovis's terrified eyes. Die! Clovis! Artorius Pendragon roared, unleashing all his power on his hands until a snap sound finally came. He had successfully broken Clovis's neck and ended his life, completely clearing the way to usurp his fate. Soon, he would snatch a glimmer of hope for himself, his loved ones, his subordinates, his nation, and humanity. Chapter 98, Fate and Victory. Clovis is dead, but this is far from over. Teacher. In fact, Artorius didn't need to shout, the purple beauty he had been waiting for had already approached from among the knights. Thanks to Artorius's help, the spell that was supposed to take 3 months to complete appeared at his feet, completed ahead of schedule. A dark purple, mysterious, and ominous light, like a living entity, entered Clovis's body, tugging at the concepts within the corpse. Those were the concepts of the Franks, the fate of the inevitable rise of Germanic peoples, the very thing Artorius had been hoping for. With this tugging, the atmosphere around them grew more ominous. The void leading to the throne of heroes became clearer. It was the terrifying entity known as the Counterforce, starting to sense the changes in this world and preparing to dispatch its agents to punish those who tampered with fate. Teacher. Rest assured. As Artorius watched the scene unfold, he anxiously urged her on, feeling a massive drain on his magical energy. This was likely what Scathatch meant by enough on your plate before, as she continued to use vast amounts of magical energy from him to hasten the process of usurping fate. Artorius's magical energy was used to maintain the giant bounded field that enveloped all of Central Europe to resist fate's influence, as well as handling previous battles, unleashing sword beams, and mass-producing tools on the rank of noble phantasm among other tasks. Terrifying magical energy, enough to drain thousands, tens of thousands of dragons, was madly flowing away in just one day and night. If not for the infinite magical energy from the third magic, he would be dead long ago. Finally, an unparalleled miracle descended upon this world. The fate, originally anchored to Clovis, was captured by Artorius Pendragon. The world that was about to separate from proper human history stabilized once again and integrated back into it. Simultaneously, the hole connecting to the throne of heroes vanished without a trace. The massive and terrifying wall that had shrouded the battlefield receded. This meant that the counter-force would no longer pursue this action. Artorius had finally reached the end of this tightrope. You did it. Scathika's tone was complex as she spoke to him. No, we did it. With Artorius's words, the enormous bounded field that covered all of Central Europe was lifted, and there was no longer any loss of magical energy, uplifting Artorius's spirits. He then looked down, gazing at the body on the ground. Clovis's eyes were wide open, seemingly unable to believe that he, who had the blessing of fate, would die at Artorius's hands. Artorius didn't want to look at him any longer. With the swing of his holy sword, the previously invulnerable neck was deftly severed. The Dragon King raised his head, using magical amplification to ensure that his voice resounded throughout the entire battlefield. Clovis is dead. Killed by me. Germanic peoples, lay down your weapons and submit to me. I am Artorius Pendragon, your new ruler. With resounding and heroic shouts echoing across the battlefield, with Clovis's death and the spread of this news, the remaining chaotic and fearful Germanic peoples completely lost their will to fight. Most of the ordinary Germanic peoples who only wished to survive fell silent. Those Germanic peoples at the periphery of the battlefield stood still, while those in the middle of the battlefield put down their weapons and awaited their fate obediently. Only a very few chose to flee. Even fewer were the fanatical loyalists of Clovis who continued to attack those around them, but they were quickly suppressed by the forces under Artorius's command, including the Germanic peoples who were originally allies. In this era where the loyalty and faith of the vast majority rested on the individual and not the nation or ethnicity, Clovis's death was enough to ensure victory. The war with the Germanic peoples had ended. At least for now. The fate of the Franks dissipated, replaced by the emergence of a new history for the British Germanic people. Artorius Pendragon achieved victory. As one of the Germanic peoples after another laid down their weapons, Artorius couldn't help but be overwhelmed by the bewildered, fearful, and hopeful expressions of the Germanic peoples. The knights and cavalry from Britain, Rome, Anglo-Saxons, and other nations who had also stopped the slaughter and already pledged allegiance to the Dragon King felt a surge of intense emotion within them. Ecstasy. Long live the king! In the west, the first knight raised his sword high and let out a triumphant cry, and soon, the resounding cheers of victory echoed along both banks of the Rhine River. Long live the king! On the anxious western bank, within the encampment of the Germanic military region, fear-stricken and surrendering tribesmen, even those who had just laid down their weapons and technically remained prisoners of war, were all infected by this inexplicable frenzy. They cheered loudly for Artorius, their new ruler who now held their fate. Throughout the Germanic lands, nearly all the barbarians joined in the celebration, rejoicing at the birth of their new common ruler, chosen by fate. The fated frost dragon opened his arms wide, proudly welcoming the honor that belonged to him. Meanwhile, the climate problem that had shrouded Europe for centuries little by little began to change. The weather was getting warmer, and the chaotic seasons and natural disasters decreased. The earth was about to transition from an old era to a new one, an era forged by Artorius, belonging to mortal men. Ha, you really did it! Watching this scene unfold and witnessing the people looking at Artorius with excitement and almost reverence, Scathatch couldn't help but sigh. Until he approached her and took her hand. Thank you, teacher. He looked gently at Scathatch, sincerely expressing his gratitude. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have succeeded so quickly. Humph. After a momentary pause, Scathatch snorted lightly, gazing at Artorius with amusement. Save those sweet words for the gullible little girls. With that said, she withdrew her hand from Artorius's grasp and turned to leave. That's it, my disciple. Don't forget our agreement. Leaving behind a graceful figure, Scathatch disappeared into the crowd. Haha. Finally, Artorius gave a fond look to the good woman. With a light chuckle, he refocused his attention on the present. There was still much to do. Subjugate these Germanic peoples, elevate their civilization, stabilize them, and strengthen their power. Stabilize and train new armies. And then, prepare for the upcoming wars and conquests. Facing the rising sun, Artorius turned his gaze westward. There, the fertile soil of Gaul awaited his arrival. It was also time for the Western Roman Empire to exit the stage of history once and for all. I'm coming, Lucius. Chapter 99, His Majesty the Emperor Artorius I. After defeating the Franks, Artorius couldn't wait to turn his gaze towards the ruler of the Western Roman Empire. Of course, being a Roman general and a provincial governor, the war against Western Rome was not a mere tribal rebellion, it was a civil war. Once the war was won, Artorius not only sought to become a protector of Rome like those Germanic chieftains but also aimed to claim the Roman imperial title as the Emperor of Rome. It was the Emperor of Rome, not just the Emperor of Romans. There was a significant difference between the two. What Artorius desired was an empire that surpassed the territorial extent of the Western Roman Empire, encompassing the British Isles, the Nordic Peninsula, Central Europe, and even vast territories like Poland and Ukraine of Eastern Europe. In short, all of Europe. At the same time, in name, Artorius sought to inherit the legacy of the Roman Empire fully, becoming an authentic Roman emperor. Both tasks were not easy and would require a considerable amount of time and effort to achieve. Furthermore, compared to the ultimate goal of saving humanity and the world, what Artorius needed to do at the moment was only a starting point. Of course, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It was best to focus on the immediate tasks first before talking about long-term goals. After the war, there was much post-war work to be done. The most important task was to assimilate the prisoners of war and further enhance Artorius's strength. This went smoothly, so much so that it left many in a daze. For example, Gawain, whose severed hand was restored through healing magecraft, couldn't help but mumble, "It's truly unimaginable. It was just so easy." Of course, for those who truly understood the situation, such ease was not surprising at all, it was entirely normal. In terms of reputation, as a Germanic general, Artorius's standing in the Germanic regions was second only to Clovis of the Franks. With Artorius's victory and the beheading of Clovis, the hierarchies underwent a complete reversal. Artorius was now the undisputed leader in the Germanic regions. In terms of power and authority, Artorius was also the strongest. A night attack had toppled the prestigious royal guards of Clovis and 3 elite Germanic berserker units, all with minimal losses on Artorius's side. The might of Britain's cavalry and Artorius's strength had shaken every Germanic peoples who participated in the battle, leaving them unable to muster any resistance. Lastly, there were the practical benefits. Perhaps this was the most crucial point. Following Artorius, Pendragon meant having enough to eat. Though Artorius provided nothing more than black bread. It was created without restriction through the infinite magical energy supply of the third magic, barely having any taste, merely serving to fill their stomachs. But so what? For those knights and nobles, it might be garbage, not even worth a glance. Even Artoria herself had already grown tired of such food. However, for the Germanic peoples who lived daily in hunger and extreme poverty, it was a luxury. Were they still considered human? Let alone black bread, they could eat grass, tree bark, and mud. As for pursuing taste or enjoyment, those were things that the Germanic peoples who had despaired due to famine would never even dare to think about. Even if they joined Clovis, even if they fought on the battlefield for the ambitions of the Wolf King of Franks, they would receive very little in return. The food sent to them was barely enough to sustain them, often nothing more than a clear broth with a few grains of wheat. Even this meager food was frequently taken away by stronger and more ruthless bastards. Upon pledging allegiance to Artorius Pendragon, the generals of Germanic peoples beheaded thousands and wiped out most of the unruly elements in their troops. It was the primary reason for their loyalty. Meanwhile, inside a tent. In terms of reputation, strength, and interests, everything favors His Majesty. Agravain's voice remained calm with a hint of delight, "There's no reason to fail." "Yes, perhaps." Awkwardly rubbing his wrist, Gawain spoke to his brother, "But I can't shake this feeling of unreality. Before this, we endured so much hardship, and everything seemed difficult. Now, all of a sudden, it's going so smoothly. There's nothing to worry about." Agravain said confidently, "Fate is on our side now." After saying this, he lowered his head, focusing all his attention on the nation's affairs. "Sir Agravain." "What?" "It's just that, you seem a bit younger." "It's His Majesty's blessing." Agravain didn't hide it. "In reward for my loyalty and diligence, His Majesty used his magic to rejuvenate my body, restoring me to my prime." "I see, so now you can continue working late nights without problems." Gawain had a look of sudden realization, which earned him a cold snort from Agravain. "You wouldn't understand the joy of working overtime if you don't do it yourself." Agravain said without mincing his words, "Assisting His Majesty in managing and controlling such a vast empire, dedicating oneself to such a magnificent endeavor, that itself is unparalleled happiness." "Is that so? I can't understand you at all." Shaking his head, Gawain replied, "I still think ordinary happiness is easier to understand." Don't the Germanic peoples think the same way? While they conversed, the Germanic peoples were cheering. Whether they were the first to join Artorius, which was the Anglo-Saxons, or those who followed later, like the Franks, Goths, or Burgundians, all were passionately celebrating. They cheered for their emperor Artorius. He stood on a large, black, circular shield. 2 of the mightiest chieftains from the Germanic tribes lifted the shield, keeping Artorius high above their heads. The chieftains, nobles, elders, and strongest warriors, gathered in the inner circle, all raised their fists and weapons, tossing their helmets into the air. They wanted Artorius to become their leader, their emperor, even more anxiously than Artorius himself. Long live the emperor! In the midst of a vast army, the Germanic peoples proclaimed their Roman emperor with their traditional coronation ceremony. It wasn't through hereditary succession or senate election. It was a more pure form, based on the support of the people and the military. What Artorius had once said became a reality. Augustus, the one with strength and valor, would be chosen. T/N, Augustus was an ancient Roman title meaning majestic, great, or venerable. It feels like a dream. I'm not dreaming, right? Watching the ecstatic celebration of the Germanic peoples, Gawain sighed, not long ago, we were enemies. Now, we're all serving the same ruler. Agravain didn't respond to his brother's words. He merely smiled at the corners of his mouth, a smile that showed both joy and a mocking amusement at Gawain's limited insight. Though their time following Artorius differed only slightly, Agravain understood their lord better. Right from the beginning, he understood, that Artorius would undoubtedly succeed, accomplishing things no one else could ever achieve. Miracle existed. Artorius' Pendragon was proof of that. Next, we shall build an empire. Agravain couldn't contain his excitement. He put down his pen, stood up, and walked out of the tent, joining the jubilant crowd. Long live the emperor! Long live Artorius I! With Artorius becoming emperor, as the first of their family to hold the title, he could now be addressed with the honorific the first. T/N, Artorius I or Artorius I. The Roman Empire has found its most fitting ruler. Next is to march on to Ravenna. Slay the fake emperor, Lucius. Ha ha ha. Gawain watched his brother Agravain in astonishment, never expecting to see the expressionless him to laugh, and laugh so joyously at that. Chapter 100, Distressed Lucius and Marriage Proposal. I'm not dreaming, right? At the same time, in the region of the Pannonian Plains, someone else uttered words similar to Gawain's. The lines were alike, but the emotions behind them were entirely different. It was frustration, hatred, and the burning fury of betrayal. It was Lucius Tiberius, the emperor of the Western Roman Empire. As he confronted the formidable army led by Theodoric of the Ostrogoths on the Pannonian Plains, he heard the terrifying news Artorius, that uncouth, rustic, country bumpkin from Britain, was now proclaiming himself the Roman emperor and Augustus. And that country bumpkin dared to declare that he would march to Rome and punish the fake emperor. Surely, this couldn't be a joke. Just 2 days ago, he had praised Artorius, calling him the pillar of the nation and the guardian of the empire's northern territories. And now, he had been backstabbed? Didn't he claim to defend the age of gods? Didn't he pledge to stand together against the new human races? How could he have turned into a traitor so quickly? In his anger and frustration, Lucius realized he was in grave danger. With Spain and North Africa already plunged into chaos, the main source of wealth and resources for the Western Roman Empire was Gaul. The vast and fertile lands of Gaul held far more value than Italy. And now, with him diverting a significant portion of his forces to deal with the Ostrogoths, Gaul was virtually undefended against Artorius. Even if he only relied on his main forces, Artorius would be more than capable of conquering all of Gaul, not to mention that he had also enlisted 400,000 Germanic barbarians. Such a situation was a major headache for even the usually proud Lucius. He couldn't help but worry that, at this rate, his Western Roman Empire would collapse. In fact, the empire was already in a perilous state. In the war against Theodoric, even though Lucius had more troops and a stronger military force, his strategic prowess and martial abilities were by no means inferior to Theodoric's. Yet, he couldn't secure a victory. In several battles, he found himself losing more than winning, as if some mysterious force was aiding the Ostrogoths. Before, when Artorius defeated Clovis, Lucius felt comforted. But now, the legacy of our ancestors is now in my hands, and it has become like this. This anguish and regret. I'm guilty of failing my country, I wish I could depose myself. With overwhelming negative emotions, Lucius had no choice but to negotiate with Theodoric. He had to cede all territories of the empire outside the Alps, while also granting an annual tribute. He had to offer gold and supplies to the barbarian chieftains, so they would remain quiet and not cause trouble. It was a customary Roman strategy. Before Attila's rise, it had always been effective. In the past, Lucius scorned this approach, believing that real men should remain indifferent to life and death. Giving gold to barbarians for peace seemed useless compared to using force. Though, in reality, 60% of his current military forces were various barbarian armies, and true Romans constituted less than 30%. It was just another form of buying peace with money. However, now, the circumstances have changed. The governor of Gaul, Sirius, wept blood and sent urgent pleas for aid to Rome at the rate of 800 letters per day. In his descriptions, the Germanic peoples who crossed the sea from Britain and traversed the Rhine River were as numerous as a flood, seemingly endless. Under his command were merely 2 legions, both of which were understaffed, and to make matters worse, a significant portion of these legions consisted of Germanic soldiers. In their first encounter with Artorius's forces, they crumbled outright. Even before Artorius's main forces could mobilize, their advance scouts of the cavalry had merely circled around, and Sirius's 2 legions were so impatient that they abandoned their armor, surrendered, or fled. This bewildered Artorius's scouts, who suspected some cunning scheme on the enemy's part. Sirius was furious and cursed them for lacking loyalty. The barbarian mercenaries, however, responded without hesitation, saying that they had served under Sirius for almost a year without pay and barely enough food. Running away and surrendering was already an act of loyalty in their view. If they were not loyal, they would have captured Sirius and offered him as a gift to the Dragon Emperor Artorius long ago. This scolding did nothing to dampen Sirius's anger, and he could only flee southward through Gaul. The terrain of Gaul was characterized by higher ground to the south and lower ground to the north, with the east being higher than the west. It can be roughly compared to the division between Vichy France and the occupied northern regions during World War II. The northern areas under German control were mostly flat plains, while the southern Vichy France comprised highlands and mountains. Artorius's grand army moved from east to west, from the north to the south. Since it was winter, all the rivers within the region had frozen, allowing for a relatively smooth advance. 2 days ago, Emperor Lucius in Pannonia received a letter stating that Governor Sirius's legions had been completely wiped out, and he barely escaped with his life. The following day brought news of Germanic barbarians approaching Lutetia. And in one more day, the great Emperor Artorius himself would arrive. This news infuriated Lucius, but he felt utterly helpless. While he sent an envoy to Theodoric's army, Artorius's envoy and the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno's envoy also arrived. The Eastern Roman Emperor encouraged and promised support to Theodoric, offering to appoint him as the imperial governor and aid him in annexing Italy, thus easing the military pressure on the Eastern Roman Empire. Meanwhile, Artorius, taking on the role of the Germanic leader, expressed his willingness to ally with Theodoric and jointly attack Rome. Once successful, they could divide the world between them. To be honest, Theodoric found the proposition quite tempting. Historically, Theodoric followed a path of alliances through a series of marriages, connecting his kingdom with the kingdom of Franks, the kingdom of Burgundy, the kingdom of Visigoths, and the kingdom of Vandals. He could be seen as an early form of the Habsburgs or a grander version of Solomon. Compared to the trifling rewards offered by Emperor Lucius, Artorius's suggestion of dividing the world was undoubtedly more appealing. In this era, Europe lacked a concept of a unified empire, and therefore, no one knew Artorius's true ambitions. As a result, Theodoric proposed a condition: if Artorius agreed, they would form an alliance. Under this alliance, Artorius would govern Gaul, and Theodoric would rule Italy. This arrangement would ensure the security and prosperity of both nations. The so-called alliance was for Artorius to become his son-in-law and marry his daughter, Amalasuintha. Considering that Theodoric had no male heir until now, his daughter, even if she couldn't become a queen, would still become the mother of the next generation of the Ostrogothic kingdom. By this, Artorius could grasp power over the Ostrogoths, making it a rather suitable deal. But, unfortunately, "I refuse," declared with unwavering indignation, was Artorius's aunt, Morgan Le Fay.